In an instant, my world crumbled. I was a millionaire, a kingpin, with a stunning wife and a trusted best friend. But one fatal night, I was ambushed and gunned down in a ruthless betrayal. Left to bleed out on the cold streets, my secrets died with me. Or so I thought. Now Jamie, my loyal friend, and Jen, my heartbroken wife, are plunged into a deadly conspiracy. As they unravel the mystery behind my murder, they discover hidden enemies, dark secrets, and a web of deceit. Their bond deepens, but so does the danger. Will they find love amidst the chaos? Or will my legacy of lies destroy them both? I couldn't believe he was gone. He was only 35, 6 years older than me. Way too young to die. But it wasn't a natural death. He died a terrible, violent death on the streets of a poor country. He was shot down along with some men he was trying to do business with. They had fooled Steve into thinking they were respectable businessmen. In reality, they were high-end drug dealers trying to move into legitimate business. Their rivals took the chance to get rid of them in a drive-by shooting with machine guns. 4 shooters, to be exact. Steve was hit 17 times. It was sheer luck. They practically cut him in half. If it's any comfort, he didn't suffer long. He died in minutes from blood loss. I wondered if he thought about his wife, Jen, and their plans to start a family soon. I wondered if he had any regrets, if he realized he should have been happy with what he had. He was already a millionaire many times over. But Steve wasn't like that. He was obsessed, always looking for the ultimate deal, the one that would make him a legend among his peers. He really thought this was it. He talked it over with me as he did with all his deals. We were usually on his boat fishing, just us. I'd look at him and grin. "Do you really expect an intelligent answer? I don't understand what you're talking about. Most of the time, this stuff gives me a headache. Are you out here to get Mr. Big or what?" He'd grin back. "Mr. Big? Definitely. Hey, did I show you my new rod? It's supposed to be the best. Think it will help me any?" "Oh, and I know you don't care or understand what I'm saying. It just helps me to say it out loud. Can't do that in the office. The walls have ears." I'd just sigh as he fiddled with the rod that probably cost 1/3 of my yearly income. He'd get frustrated, toss it down, pick up the old rod I had given him, and start catching fish. In the time I knew him, he probably spent 10 grand on fishing equipment, not counting the boat. He never listened when I tried to teach him, and the fish had to almost jump onto his hook before he caught one. But he had a blast trying. My time with the military had taught me there was probably no safe place to talk. Boats we could see might have equipment that allowed them to hear our conversations, not to mention hacked phones and lip readers. The opportunities were endless. I let him go, though. What he talked about had nothing to do with national security or corporate espionage, so he was probably safe. I did give him my opinion for the first time since we'd met. "You need to think about this, dude. I've been where you're going, and it's not Paris. People there would cut your throat for your watch and shoes. Hire security while you're there and listen to them. Almost no one there is what they seem." He just laughed and tried to talk me into going with him. I politely declined. After a few hours, he gave up on Mr. Big and took comfort in brotherhood. But Jen frowned as I helped him out of his truck and into the living room where we laid him on the couch. He was snoring in minutes. "Want me to help get him into bed?" Jen smiled a sad smile. "Not really. Let him sleep it off there. When he wakes up with a stiff neck and an aching back, he might think twice before he does it again. I swear, Jamie, you bring out the best and the worst in him, usually at the same time. How do you do that?" I shrugged. "Natural talent, I guess. Surely his other friends bring him home drunk sometimes." I didn't know how to take her answer. "He doesn't have any other friends, Jamie. All the rest want something from him, or he wants something from them. With those guys, you don't just hang out. Every party is a business meeting. Every social event is just an opportunity to network. It's all about the business." That can't be true. When he's around me, we rarely talk about business. Most times it's about hunting, fishing, the women we have known and bedded, the ones that got away, the ones we wished had gotten away. Hot cars, hot bikes, hot boats, normal guy stuff. When he does talk business, I don't understand half of what he says anyway. And that's why he loves you. You don't care about his money, his status, or his business sense. All you care about is the good times you have together. Plus, you don't hesitate to call him out when he starts spouting junk. He loves you because you don't expect anything but friendship from him. Meeting you was one of the best things that ever happened to him." She looked at him and sighed. He had told me they were supposed to have a date night. Business had been intense and he had been neglecting her. Not a good idea because she wasn't just pretty. She was incredibly beautiful. She used to be a model before she married. She still worked out and kept that amazing figure. Men would walk into doors and buildings when she walked by. I knew because I'd seen it happen. Besides her great body, she had a perfect face. Nice smile, pouty lips, and blue eyes you could get lost in. The first 3 times I was around her, I could barely talk. She finally made me do 3 shots with her and told me the funniest, dirtiest jokes for 30 minutes. I was laughing so hard I forgot to be shy. We've been friends ever since. One day I had an idea. "Do you own any jeans?" I'd never seen her in anything but dresses and skirts. "A closet full. Why? Got any boots? Cowboy boots?" "Maybe," she grinned. "Why, Jamie, are you getting kinky? Because if you are, I have these thigh-high black boots that go great with my leather corset and flogger. If you mean regular boots, I have them in snakeskin, ostrich skin, and plain old leather." After I stopped blushing and she stopped laughing, I asked her out. She seemed surprised and asked me why. "Because, Jen, you need to get out and have some fun. Let Steve sleep, and I'll take you to a place you've never been. I'm going out tonight. A little club I bet you'd love. You're a very beautiful woman, and I'm sure most men would do anything for a chance with you. I'm not one of them. I don't cross lines, and I respect boundaries. I just want you to have fun. Let your hair down. Maybe dance a bit. I'll watch over you and even take pictures. Then you can tease Steve when he's hungover. You seem down, and I thought I'd offer. Will there be beer and rednecks? Maybe a bar fight or two? Definitely no to the last part. You don't cause trouble there. It's painful if you do. If anyone roughs up a woman, the bouncers won't get to him before the crowd does. They just take out the trash. It's a friendly, couples-oriented place. Just thought I'd offer." I got up from the kitchen table, rinsed my coffee cup, and put it on the counter. Jen always joked that with my neat habits, I'd make a fine wife someday. "We'll take the Jag. We'll take the truck. If you took the Jag, every guy there would drool on it. Jeans and a nice shirt. And Jen, could you tone down the heat a bit? The way you look now, I'd get my butt kicked a dozen times trying to protect you." She stuck her tongue out and told me to wait 10 minutes. I said I needed to go home and shower to get rid of the fish smell and get clean clothes. She grabbed my hand and led me to the master bedroom, which made me uncomfortable. "Stand here." She walked into Steve's closet, a 12 by 12 room packed full. Hers was twice as big. I heard her opening drawers and she came back with jeans, a western shirt, and snakeskin boots. She led me to a guest room with a large bathroom. "Here you go. He bought these new after he met you and never wore them. I didn't bring you any boxers, so it's commando for you. Now clean up and meet me downstairs in 20 minutes. Steve and I were the same size, down to the shoes. The only difference was height. He was half an inch taller. Same hair, same eyes. People thought we were brothers. I showered, enjoyed the multiple shower heads, shaved with the kit I found, and dressed. I had to admit I looked pretty good. They say clothes make the man, and she tried to tone it down, but it didn't work. Those jeans were so tight, I was afraid if she sneezed, they'd rip. A western shirt, pale pink to match her lipstick. Her curly hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. She had a white Stetson in her hands and bright red boots on her feet. "How do I look?" she asked as she twirled. "Trouble. You look like trouble," she smirked. Exactly the look I was going for. Now come on. We checked on Steve, who was now hugging a pillow and snoring. Jen wrote him a note and placed it on the coffee table with a bottle of water and 3 Tylenol. We took his truck since mine was still at the marina. It was a brand new, shiny 4-door, 4-wheel drive truck in pearl white with gleaming chrome. Well, I thought as I drove to the bar, at least it was a truck. We arrived 40 minutes later at the barn, a huge building designed to look like, well, a barn. Almost everyone outside ogled the truck. But when I got out and helped Jen step down, every guy immediately forgot the truck and ogled Jen. She knew she was getting attention and strutted into the place like she owned it. She had a tight grip on my arm, so maybe she wasn't as confident as she seemed. When we walked through the door, everything stopped, and people just stared. The band hadn't started yet, and the usually noisy place went quiet. I just grinned and kept walking, waving to Mary for a pitcher of beer. In less than 3 minutes, she was there. She poured Jen's beer but spilled mine all over the table while staring at her. I gently took her arm and stopped the flow. She looked down, turned bright red, and started apologizing. Jen patted her arm. "Don't worry about it, honey. I was the same way the first time I saw Jamie." Mary looked from Jen to me, mumbled something, and walked off, bumping into 2 tables on our way back to the bar. I grinned. "Watch out, Jen. Mary is a switch hitter and she's pretty good." Jen laughed. "She's out of luck. I quit playing for both teams after college." It was my turn to choke on my beer. I saw the friends I was supposed to meet and waved them over, making introductions. It took 45 minutes and 3 beers for them to relax, and by then, Jen had charmed them completely. They would have done anything for her. I had seen her work her magic before, so I just sat back and enjoyed the show. Then the band started, and I grabbed her, taking her to the floor for a 2-step. It took her about 30 seconds to catch on. I learned she had a college degree in dance. The song rolled into a line dance, then the cowboy cha-cha. By then, I was out of breath and dragged her back to the table. "I'm tagging out, Greg. See if you can keep up." She was pulling him out of his chair before he knew what happened. 30 minutes later, she brought him back, huffing and puffing like he was about to have a heart attack. She finally sat and had a beer. 10 minutes later, the band played a slow song. It was a favorite with the crowd, and they called it the Snuggle Special. She pulled me to the dance floor. It was one of the most sensual things I'd ever experienced, and she had no idea. She pressed against me, no space between us, swaying her body against mine. The inevitable happened, and I tried to pull back. She looked surprised, then grinned and pressed closer. I was in a daze when the song ended, and it took her a while to get me to let go. When I did, I blushed and rushed to the bathroom, washing my face and arms with cold water. By the time I got back, she had Greg on the floor. I watched as she twirled and swayed to the music. Her ballet training showed. Poetry in motion finally made sense to me. Then Barb tried to ruin the mood by getting catty. "Jamie, I thought you said you would never hook up with anyone married." She was staring daggers at Jen. Barb had been a stunning woman before. 4 kids and 3 divorces later, she was only 34 and still attractive with the right makeup and lighting. Not so much in daylight. She decided I would be lucky number 4 and came after me while she was still with number 3. I didn't tell her the thought of being with her made my skin crawl. I let her down easy, saying as wonderful as the offer was, I was going to pass. I had a strict rule about married women. Leave them alone. When number 3 finally caught her and kicked her out, she hung around the clubs looking. She was getting child support from 3 different dads and had won some cash in the last divorce. My guess was he paid her to leave him alone. She didn't work and lived off her exes. It's not easy, but it can be done. Barb, her husband is one of my best friends, and I would never do anything to make him think less of me. He wasn't available, and Jen wanted to go out. So here we are. It's just harmless fun for her, and she's having a good time. Have you seen her do anything inappropriate? She's either at the table or on the dance floor in plain sight. The guys she's danced with will have stories for the rest of their lives about dancing with a woman once voted the most beautiful in the world. Bullshit. I've seen the way she looks at you, and the way you look at her when she's not watching. She's infatuated, and you're in love. Maybe so, Barb, but say I did love her. So what? She doesn't love me. And even if she did, she's out of reach. I might as well try to grab the sun. I'm just grateful she's my friend and that her husband trusts us both. Think hard, Barb. Try to remember trust and being worthy of it. It's been a while, I'd guess, since any woman would trust you around her husband or him around you. You've had the trust and love of 3 men already. How's that working out for you? This is the only time I'll say this, Barb. After this, you're on your own. It's time to change. Look at where you are in your life and make a change. You'll never be happy or make anyone else happy until you do. You're still attractive under all that makeup. Get out of the bars and wash it off. Show the world your real face and you might find a man who loves it. End of lecture. She stared at me, turning pale, then red, then pale again. Then she surprised me by crying. First little tears, then big ones, followed by sobbing. I didn't know what to do. It hurt me to think I caused her pain. So I hugged her, which made her cry even more. I patted her back until she calmed down to soft sniffles. I didn't see Jen had come back. She pulled out tissues from her purse and started gently cleaning Barb's face while the sniffles stopped. Then she surprised everyone by taking Barb to the restroom, with half the women at the tables following. Thanks to her modeling career, Jen knew a lot about makeup. When she reappeared with Barb, the change was amazing. Gone were the hard lines and thick makeup. She had on makeup, but it was subtle and flattering. Her hair looked softer and more natural. I noticed her shirt was buttoned up for the first time, not flaunting cleavage. The top 2 buttons were still undone, giving a hint instead of a full show. It didn't take long for the guys to notice. Many didn't realize who she was until they were right in front of her. Men who had walked right by her before suddenly found themselves asking her to dance. And for the first time since I'd known her, she said no a lot. When someone asked her to dance, she would look at Jen and decide based on her expression. We wrapped up the night on a high note and watched as Barb left with her female friends, not with a random guy. I drove, listening to Jen's contented humming. She hummed without realizing it when she was really happy. We drove up to her mansion, punched the code into the keypad, and I parked the truck in the garage. It was 2 a.m, and she told me I was spending the night. I'd been up almost 20 hours by then, and it sounded like a great idea. We managed to wake Steve enough to get him into bed. Then I went into the guest room and crashed. It was 10 before I woke up. I found Jen and Steve at the kitchen table drinking coffee. Jen looked just as gorgeous as ever, and Steve still looked a little green. I grinned. Man, am I ever hungry? I think I'll make some breakfast. Red-hot sausage, eggs with peppers and onions covered in hot sauce. Better yet, I'll make my famous breakfast chili and pour it over the eggs and potatoes, greasy fried potatoes. If they're not dripping when you serve them, you've done it wrong. And the eggs have to be runny so the hot chili can finish cooking them and soak in the flavor. How about a big bowl, Steve? You can wash it down with a Bloody Mary with extra Tabasco sauce. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. Steve got greener until he jumped up and ran to the bathroom. I yelled at his retreating back. Redneck wisdom here, Steve. Just because you bring a case of beer doesn't mean you have to drink a case of beer. Now, how about breakfast? Jen swatted me on the arm, grinned, and then toasted bagels with jam and cream cheese. It almost made Steve go back to the bathroom. I probably drank 4 cups of coffee. They bought the best and had a maker designed by NASA. I think it even factored in barometric pressure while it brewed. Steve was back on the couch again when Jen took me back to my truck. I had a great time last night. Thank you. It's been so long since I left the house for an evening just to have fun. Why do you envy me? Because I live a simple life. I probably make in a year what Steve makes in a few days. I have to worry about bills, paying a mortgage and a car payment, wondering if my job will hold up, or if I'll be out on the streets if the economy goes bad. If Steve stopped bringing in money today, you could still live the same lifestyle you have now for the rest of your life. Like the guy said, money won't buy you happiness, but it will buy you the best brand of misery. You think I care about any of that? I made enough off modeling that I never have to worry about what Steve has. I quit modeling with one goal, to find a good man and have a family. I'm trying to get Steve to start a family. And for 3 years in a row, he said, maybe next year. My clock is ticking, honey. I'm not getting any younger. Really? Are you even 30 yet? Relax, Jen. You have all the time in the world. Believe it or not, that was the first conversation I remembered when I found out he had died. No one notified me. I heard it on the nightly news like everyone else. I drove straight over, only to find the place full of people I didn't know. The guy who answered the door didn't want to let me in, so I pushed past him, and he fell against the wall. I found Jen in the living room, surrounded by 3 of her college friends, probably the only real friends she had there. She was sitting, staring blankly, numb from grief. When she saw me, she wailed and held out her arms. I soon had her on my lap while she cried like a baby, her friends comforting her. The wailing subsided to sobs, then sniffles, and finally, she fell asleep. Her friends gave me a look of gratitude. I knew one of them. I had met her at their house, and we got along well. She even asked me to escort her to an awards dinner once. Jen fussed over me like a mother, buying me a new suit, shirt, tie, shoes, and sending me to her stylist. I probably looked the best I ever had when I met them at their house. I was told to drive the Mercedes and be a perfect gentleman. Sandy, Jen's friend, grinned as Jen gave me instructions. Not too perfect, Jen. I've never met a real redneck. I've heard they can be lots of fun." I turned red, and Jen had an expression I couldn't read. We had a great time. Sandy was a lawyer, a very good one. The award was for a pro bono case she won, freeing a man who had served 7 years in jail after proving his innocence. She was now representing him in a civil suit against the police and DA who convicted him, proving evidence tampering and lies. They were trying to settle for $500,000. Sandy insisted on no less than $3 million. They later settled for $2.2 million. She arranged for the money to be paid in installments of $220,000 a year for 10 years. It was enough to set him up for life if he was careful. But it couldn't bring back the 7 years he lost or his family. His wife had divorced him, taken their daughter, and moved across the state, saying she didn't feel safe with him around. She remarried and was about to divorce again. Sandy got him scheduled visits and 1 weekend a month with his daughter. She also suggested counseling sessions to help them reconnect. Eventually, his daughter petitioned to live with him when her mother's second marriage failed. Surprisingly, he brought his ex-wife back to town, got her an apartment, and supported her until she could manage on her own. He said it was to make up for the child support he should have paid. She hinted at reconciliation, but he turned her down. Instead of going back to work, he enrolled in community college, then transferred to a state school, getting a degree in engineering. He and his daughter shared an apartment during her freshman year at the same school. I had a great time at the awards dinner and enjoyed the dancing afterward. Jen taught me to dance in the expected style, and I'm sure she nursed a few bruised toes during the lessons. I dressed well enough to fit in, and when asked, I said I was in construction management, not elaborating. I was actually a crew foreman and made decent money. I even had a degree in construction management thanks to the GI Bill. My bosses were impressed enough to promise me the next management position available. I was talking to one lawyer I got along with while Sandy mingled. I heard her say no loudly and saw her pull her hand away from a guy. I casually walked over, surprising her by kissing her on the cheek. "Hi, hun. Enjoying the evening?" "I was," she said darkly, eyeing the guy in front of her. He looked at me and grinned. He had to be at least 65 and weighed over 250 pounds. He had muscles, but they looked like gym muscles. I was 5'10", weighed 170, and my muscles were from hard work. I saw the dismissal in his eyes. I'd seen guys like him before. One thing the military taught me was how to handle guys like him. I grinned back. "You want to trade insults? Beat on your chest a bit? Maybe howl? Let's skip that and go straight to your butt kicking." I've faced guys like you before. Win or lose, I make sure they never look the same again. But you look like you can afford a good plastic surgeon. So do you want to fight or walk away? He started to bluster, and I held up a hand. Yes or no? Walk or fight? Say anything else, and I'll take it as a signal to start. He stuttered for a few seconds, looked around wildly, but no one seemed interested in backing him up. Many even seemed eager to see him get beaten. He deflated like a balloon and walked away. Sandy looked at me like I had grown 2 heads, then grinned. "You've destroyed him. You realize he'll never be seen as an alpha male by anyone who saw that. They'll spread the story, and his power base is gone. He'll probably leave the firm within 3 months." I shrugged. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else eventually. Want to dance? She did. It turns out lawyers can be pretty good dancers. Afterward, she was all over me like a cat in heat the moment we left. 3 blocks later, she shrugged out of the top of her dress. We managed to get to her garage, where I pulled her out, bent her over the hood, and had a quickie. It probably didn't last 5 minutes, but it was intense. I carried her inside, planning to put her on the couch, but she told me where the bedroom was. I stood her up and she shrugged, letting the dress fall to the floor. I didn't know it at the time, but we destroyed a $3,000 designer dress. We went to the bedroom and had amazing sex. "I really like you," she said. "I'd love to see you again, but right now my career comes first. I won't be looking for anyone to share my life until I make partner. That's a few years away. Can you live with that?" I think I surprised her. "I understand. You're attractive, great in bed, and have a nice personality. But I'm not looking for a house with a picket fence right now. We can still be friends if you like." She grinned. "Make that friends with benefits and you have a deal. Jen was right about you." I asked, and she just grinned, telling me to get the details from Jen. Jen was a little off for a while, but after a long talk with her friend, She was back to her sunny self. Sandy gave a glowing report of the date. "I'm glad you're smart enough not to get serious. Sandy's not the one for you." I was a bit down. "I don't think there's a one out there for me, Jen. Every time I meet someone, I use you as a measuring stick and they all fall short." She blushed and seemed to glow while Steve laughed. "You're ruined then. My wife is one of a kind, the gold standard of women in this world." Jen glowed even more and I left, knowing they would be making love before my truck left the driveway. I wasn't jealous, but I did think that if he felt that way, he shouldn't neglect her so much. Sandy stood with her friends and motioned for me to follow. I carried Jen to her bedroom, and they turned down the sheets. I laid her down, gently touching her cheek before I left the room. At least one of her friends stayed with her all night. I went back to the living room, shocked at what I saw. The place had turned into a party. They found the liquor cabinet and were drinking heavily. I kept it together until they turned on the music, blasting it. Sandy came back and looked at me, understanding what I was thinking. "Who are these people?" I asked. "A lot of Steve's business associates here to stake a claim and pick the bones. Some are from her modeling days, trying to lure her back. The rest are just here for a good time. They'll use her until she comes to her senses, then drift away to another victim." "You're her lawyer, right?" I asked. "And Janice? She's a doctor?" "Yes," Sandy said, smiling as she realized where I was going. "Then ask her if this is a good environment for Jen right now. We've already talked about it. It's not. But as intelligent, professional women, there's little we can do against this crowd. We're thinking of hiring security." I stood up. "Well, I'm not a woman and have never been known for my smarts. Maybe I can save you some money." I got everyone's attention by turning off the music. "On behalf of Jen and Steve, thank you all for coming. Jen's doctor has prescribed bed rest and quiet, so please honor her wishes and leave. You can come back later after she's had time to process. I'm sure she would appreciate it." "Who the hell are you? A whore?" Before I could respond, Sandy got in his face. "He's probably the only guy here who actually cares about Jenny. Leave her alone. If not, I'll have my security consultant deal with you. He has 2 black belts and has been charged with murder twice. But I got it changed to justifiable homicide because he was protecting a client both times. Want to test him?" None of that was true, but they didn't know. They left, grumbling, until it was just me, Janice, Sandy, Melody, and Jen. Janice said she had given Jen a sedative and she'd probably sleep through the night. She turned to me. "Jamie, can you stay? Melody will be here, but we'd feel better if you stayed too. Jen's going to be shaky for a while and needs friends around her." I ended up staying for 4 days, moving into the 2-bedroom guest cottage while the women stayed in the house. There was a huge turnout for his funeral, and Jen held my arm in a death grip, only letting go when I did my pallbearer duties. I sat beside her during the graveside service. She had cried herself out and sat numbly as the preacher spoke. The vultures decided that with me around, they couldn't advance their agendas. So they left us in peace, and we returned to a quieter house with maybe 20 people who genuinely cared about Jen. I left the next day after Melody and Sandy assured me they wouldn't leave her alone for a while. I didn't see her again until I was called to her house for the reading of the will. It seems Steve had left me something. She was 10 pounds lighter and still a bit pale, but she smiled when she hugged me. Jen naturally got everything except for a few personal items he wanted me to have, all his fishing equipment, his boat, and his truck. He also left me a letter that I read when I got home. Man, if you're reading this, then I'm dead. That sucks. I hope you're in your 60s when you get this, but if you're getting what I left you, it's probably a lot earlier. I can't tell you what you meant to me. For the first time in my life, I had a friend who didn't care about how much I had or what I could do for him. Just a guy who wanted to hang out, maybe fish, and have a few beers. Think of me when you're on the boat, reeling in a monster. Raise a beer in my memory now and then. One more thing. Keep an eye on Jen. I should have been a better husband, but she was the love of my life. Don't let her do anything foolish while she gets herself together. If she turns to you, get serious. Name the first son Steve. Just kidding, dude. But stranger things have happened, and I know you'd be good for her. Think about it. Your friend, Steve. I was a little surprised when a delivery van pulled into my driveway a week later. The guy had a full load and a note. "Jamie, I know you're not expecting this and probably wouldn't take it if you had a choice. But I want you to have them. I'm leaving for a while. I can't take another night in that big, empty house. I'll return, but I can't say when. These are Steve's clothes. They'll fit you perfectly. They're too good to waste. I doubt you'll wear more than 2 of the suits, but it will be nice to have them. The jeans and casual clothes will come in handy, as well as the boots. Please don't be offended. I know he would have wanted you to have them. Wear them in good faith, remembering the man who was your friend. Remember, too, that I was also your friend. I hope you let me continue to be. Love, Jen. I let the stuff sit in my spare room for a few weeks before I could go through them. Who needs 28 suits? In the end, I kept 8 highly expensive and good-looking ones. The rest I donated. Some bargain hunter would be thrilled to find them. I kept most of the jeans and casual clothes and all 36 pairs of shoes and boots. Each pair probably cost more than I made in a month. I never have to buy shoes again. Life went on. I'd fish once in a while, always feeling guilty when I used the boat and truck. I hardly ever drove the truck because it was too nice for construction sites. I'd go out on the boat, look through the expensive gear, but most often I used the old Zabka rig I had given him. I still remember the night I met him. I didn't have a boat, so I fished from the bank. I was at a hot spot right below the discharge chute of a power plant. A lot of stuff got caught up in the turbulence and came out the other end. It was catfish heaven. I had already decided to call it a night at 11. I had caught 4 decent fish and a 20-pound monster, enough to keep me stocked with catfish for months. Steve came stumbling down the path in the dark. "You okay, man?" I could tell he was a little tipsy. "Yeah, maybe. My car quit on me a little ways back, and I guess I took a wrong turn. To top it off, my phone is dead. Can you call an Uber for me?" "I'll do it, but we need to get to higher ground for reception. Sit here while I pack up my gear, and I'll call when we get up top. Shouldn't take long." He sat watching as I reeled in my lines. One last catfish hit just as I was reeling in the last line. Steve was right beside me, watching in awe. "Here," I said, grinning. "Reel him in for me." He took the rod, but admitted he had no idea what to do. "Keep the line tight so he can't spit the hook. Just keep reeling. When his head comes out of the water, I'll net him." It was a nice catfish, at least 10 pounds. I'll never forget the look on his face. "Wow, I've always wanted to catch a fish." He had never fished before. What planet did this guy live on? He helped me carry my stuff back to the truck, and then we went to look at his car. It was a BMW, all chrome and gleaming paint. "I'll call tomorrow and get it towed." "No, call them now. Look around. We're in the middle of nowhere. If some good old boys see this sitting here, only the frame will be left by morning. Call them now." "Can I use your phone?" I hit speed dial. "Wilbur, yeah, it's late, but I got a hot one. A BMW dead at the end of Lookout Point. Can you come and get it? We'll wait." I had it on speaker. How the hell did a Beamer get way out there? I think the guy got lost. "Give me 20 minutes. We waited, talking while he drove over. It was dark with no lights anywhere. 10 minutes later, a truck pulled up and 3 guys got out. They saw my truck but couldn't see us. Thinking it was some guy fishing, they started tugging on the door handles. I turned my lights on. "Move on, boys. Grab your rods and go fishing. They're biting pretty good." It was clear they had been drinking. One guy told me to mind my own business or they'd mind it for me. I got out holding my Taurus .357 down by my side. "Move on. Or what? Or I blow what you use for brains out. You ain't got no gun." I raised it and fired a round. A .357 is pretty loud and it echoed off the lake. They nearly drove off before one could get in, so he jumped into the bed as they sped away. Steve looked at me like I was an alien. "Would you have shot them?" "I wouldn't have had to. Once they saw the gun, all the fight left them. If they had been armed or forced the issue, I would have reacted accordingly. Here comes Wilbur." Wilbur got out, looked over the car, and grinned. "I'm not even asking, but you need to get the undercarriage looked at before you drive it. This is a rough road." He gave Steve a card with the address of his garage. I asked Steve where he lived as Wilbur's taillights faded. It was less than 20 miles away. He wanted to call his wife because he didn't think he could get an Uber there. He was probably right. "There's no need to get your wife out of bed. I'll take you home. It's kind of on my way." He sat quietly for most of the ride. His driveway was long and winding, leading through trees to a mansion. "You live here?" "Yeah. I bought it for my wife last year. Care to come in?" "I don't think so. I'm dirty and I smell like liver, worms, and catfish." Probably not an aroma your wife would appreciate right now. Call Wilbur in the morning. He's AC certified and most of his business is Mercedes and Audis. He can probably fix anything wrong with your car. I waited until he got on his porch. Wilbur checked the car over and found a bent tie rod. Steve had him fix it and asked about me when he picked it up. Wilbur told me what he said. "Jamie's a good guy, Mr. Rodham, and probably the best fisherman I've ever seen. He can be on the bank with 20 anglers and be the only one catching anything. When the local fire department needs fish for a fry, they call him. He's usually good for 50 pounds or more." Steve was sitting in my driveway when I got home from work 3 days later. He got out, looking embarrassed. "Can I talk to you for a minute? I have a business proposition." Curious, I brought him in and gave him a glass of tea. After a few minutes of stuttering, it came out. "I've always wanted to learn how to fish. I'd be more than willing to pay if you'll teach me. I can make it worth your while." I thought about it for a few minutes. I could tell he was sincere. "All right. Be here at 7 on Friday night and we'll spend a few hours catfishing. Once you get the hang of that, we'll try bass and crappie. I won't charge you anything except the cost of bait and a few beers, so don't insult me with offers to pay. Every man should know how to fish." He was so excited he could barely talk. About a month later, he wanted me to follow him home to introduce me to his wife. I had no idea what she looked like, but I figured with his kind of money, she'd be gorgeous. For once in my life, I got something right. I didn't follow fashion magazines, so I had no idea who she was. I just knew she was probably the most attractive woman I'd ever seen. She smiled and tried to shake my hand, but I pulled it back. "Sorry, ma'am, but I've got fish bait on my hands. Not something you'd want to feel or smell." She just stared for a minute before she grinned. "Well, then I insist you come in and wash up so I can greet a new friend properly." I practically scrubbed my hands in that sink, trying not to offend her. I surprised her again when I wouldn't sit on her couch. So she moved us to the kitchen table where I felt more at ease. Where I grew up, friends never went to the front door and rarely left the kitchen because there was always coffee on and something fresh out of the oven. After we got to know each other and I told her about my upbringing, she grinned. From then on, whenever I was coming over, she made sure the coffee was ready. They kind of adopted me, but I remembered my manners and never overstayed my welcome. Jen was a hell of a woman, but when we met, she had no idea what to do in a kitchen. They had a maid who did most of their cooking when they were home. They ate out a lot, mostly business dinners with Steve's clients. I brought them a pecan pound cake once, and they raved about it. Steve ate 3 pieces, and Jen had 2. They were shocked when I told them I baked it. My mother taught me. It's a family secret passed down from my great-grandmother, so don't ask for the recipe. I ended up teaching her how to bake, starting with simple things like banana nut bread and pineapple upside-down cake. She got hooked on Pinterest and YouTube, practicing a lot. Steve gained 5 pounds before he begged her to stop. I suggested she bake for church or civic organization bake sales instead, which turned out to be a mixed blessing. She'd leave with 2 cakes and come home with 3. She made many friends in the community and joined a couple of civic organizations she liked. Oddly enough, many of their meetings ended up being held at her house. Jen was happy, saying it gave her something to do while Steve traveled or worked. The fire department was her favorite, and she worked tirelessly to support it. She donated money, but her time was even more valuable. The local department ended up being one of the best equipped and trained in the state. The only time she flaunted her money was when she read an article about the rise in cancer among firefighters due to fumes and residue from new building materials. Jen consulted experts and had a modified hazmat shower built, along with a truck to haul it. She organized volunteers to set it up and balance the soaps and chemicals needed to decontaminate suits and equipment. Firefighters walked through the shower in full gear before stripping it off and going through it again. Departments from all over the country came to observe the procedure. The showers were horribly expensive and beyond the means of most volunteer departments. So Jen founded a charity to fund them and served as the face and first chairwoman. She often made personal appearances across the country to drum up support. She won awards that she accepted with thanks but rarely talked about, preferring the focus to stay on the mission. I escorted her to a couple of functions when Steve was traveling, and most people thought I was her husband. She rarely corrected them and giggled about it later. "You and Steve look so much alike that it's a common mistake, especially if they've been drinking. Just go with it." When it was time for the annual Christmas parade, our small town insisted she serve as Grand Marshal to honor her for her efforts. She ended up riding on top of an antique fire engine, a 1921 American LaFrance, as a tribute. It was the biggest Christmas parade ever held in the town. Jen wanted me to ride with her, but I refused. This is your moment, Jen. They want to honor you. Accept it with the spirit it was given. The applause rippled through the town as she passed, and by the end she had tears in her eyes. She told me later that all the acclaim she'd received while modeling meant less than what she got that cold December afternoon. She had been gone for 5 months. She briefly returned to modeling, did a couple of guest appearances on fashion shows, and even sat in as a substitute judge for 3 weeks. Then she just disappeared. I tried calling her a couple of times, but the number had been changed. I called Sandy and she was in the same boat. She's processing, honey. She thought her life was set. Did you know she was planning to decorate 2 bedrooms for children? She hoped to have one for a boy and one for a girl. Unless she remarries soon, that dream will fade. She's done this before. When her aunt, who practically raised her, passed away suddenly, she went off the grid for 6 weeks. Then she just showed up again, carried on like she hadn't been gone, and refused to talk about where she'd been. Don't worry, Jamie, she'll show back up sooner or later. Remember, her dream house is here. I doubted that when I saw her house featured on the cover of a real estate magazine. It was priced at $2.2 million and sold in a week for $2.6 million after a bidding war between 3 couples. After 9 months, I had accepted that she was now just a pleasant memory. It was Saturday, and I was in my shop doing what I loved best. Besides construction management, I had a degree in furniture design. I bought my house partially because it had a large workshop out back, a 24 by 36 metal building. I had a lot of tools, and now that I had room, I bought equipment I hadn't been able to use before. I had a huge lathe, a steam unit to soften wood for bending, and a planer capable of working on a 30-inch board. In short, I had almost everything a professional furniture maker needed to produce quality products. I had another shed full of lumber, packed with oak, pecan, black walnut logs, cedar, and even some holly. At that moment, I was making a rocking chair for a friend. She was vertically challenged, as she liked to put it. Her adult height was 4 feet 6 inches, and she was the tallest of her siblings. This chair was designed for optimal comfort for her size, somewhere between a child's chair and a full-size one. I was sanding the edges of the seat when I felt the door open. I didn't look up. Most of my friends and neighbors knew what I did on Saturdays, so if they wanted something or just stopped by to say hi, they knew to come to the shop first. I finished sanding the bottom and looked up, almost dropping the chair when I saw who it was. She looked older. She was 15 pounds thinner, and she didn't need to lose weight. Her eyes were sad, but they brightened when I looked up. Her smile matched her eyes. Instead of saying hello, her first words surprised me. How come I never knew you made furniture? It never came up in conversation. Besides, it's just a hobby. I'd love to do it full-time, but I'm not sure I could support myself. I'd have to charge high prices, and I don't think most people could afford it. I know lots of people who would love custom-made furniture and wouldn't mind the price if it was good quality. You should have let me help you. I struggled for a moment, trying to frame my answer. You were my friends, Jen, not a business opportunity. If I'd come to you, I'd have been like all the other people you and Steve had to deal with. You would have always wondered if I was truly your friend or just using you. So I didn't bring it up. Steve never knew. If I had told him, he would have hounded me with suggestions like the one you just gave. You were worth more to me as friends. Do you understand? Tears started. And that's why we loved you. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Yeah, I could tell that from all the calls and visits I got from you. I knew you wouldn't understand. I had to leave after a few days. Rattling around in that big old house was just too much. Plus, every time I saw you, it reminded me of Steve. I tried going back to my old life, but that got stale pretty quick. I'd forgotten how shallow and calculating most of those people were. I can understand that, but you didn't call Sandy or any of your old friends. Do you think they liked being shut out of your life? If you're going to be back for more than a few days, you need to give them a call and try to mend fences. What she'd done hit her, and she cried harder. I shut down my machinery, knowing there would be no more work that day. I took her into the house, made coffee, and got out the pecan pound cake I'd made the day before. She ate 2 pieces before she started making phone calls. Sandy and the rest of the girls showed up 90 minutes later, kissed me on the cheek, and threw me out of the house. I piddled around before deciding to light my grill. I'd marinated some leg quarters the night before, so I grilled them along with a few steaks, potatoes, ears of corn, and honey-glazed carrots with toasted pecans. The smell drew them out to my deck. My house was a manufactured one because it was the best value for the money, but I had modified it quite a bit. I was very proud of my multi-level deck with a built-in table that wrapped in a semicircle around a big oak. It was the first time any of them had been there, so they wandered around, checking out my koi pond with a little island that held a large Japanese lantern, and admiring a vegetable garden laid out with military precision. They were surprised that one whole section was dedicated to flowers. I had sunflowers of all sizes and colors, zinnias, African daisies, different colors of cosmos, and marigolds. When I called them to eat, I was amazed. They ate like construction workers, not fashion models or professional women. They laughed about the whole roll of paper towels they had to use. Sandy sat back and let loose a very unladylike belch, which broke the whole group up. "I'm thinking, Jamie, that I need to review my relationship expectations. You cook, you build furniture, and you aren't hard to look at." Everyone laughed except Jen, who looked a little irritated. The girls noticed and grinned harder, teasing her by giving me their numbers. I looked at Melody. "Aren't you married?" "I am, and I love him dearly. I wanted you to have my number so we could set up some training sessions for hubby. He could use a few pointers." They relaxed as twilight gathered, staying as I switched on my party lights. They especially enjoyed the Japanese lantern on the little island. All the lights were designed to draw insects away from the deck. I brought out a carafe of coffee and the pecan pound cake. They groaned but managed to eat every bite of it. They all demanded the recipe. "Sorry, girls, but it's a family secret." "Did you even give it to me?" Jen asked. "I begged for almost 2 years." "He says it will stay in the family," Sandy added with a smirk. "Well, then we'll have to get him married off to one of us to ensure a steady supply. Any volunteers?" All of them turned to Jen. She blushed but promised to do a little research. There were a lot of hugs and kisses as they left. Sandy pulled me aside. "I know men are thick most of the time, so let me lay it out for you. She didn't come back for us. She came back for you. If you're not interested, let her down gently. If you are, go slow. She's still a little fragile." I was completely surprised. "Her? Me? She's miles above me, Sandy. She's rich, beautiful, and I'm just an average guy trying to make ends meet. It would never work." She slapped me lightly. "You're even dumber than most. She doesn't care about what you have. She already has possessions and riches. She needs a man who loves her despite all that. If you get together, it won't be because of her money or your lack of it. You can give her what she desires most in this world, and it won't cost either of you a dime. She wants the love of a good man and a family. She's talked about children ever since we were in college. Man up, Jamie." We waved as they left, and I went back into the house. "Where are you staying? I know you sold the house." "I'm staying with you, at least for a while. You don't mind, do you? I can get an extended stay suite somewhere if you do, but I'd really like to stay here. I want to surround myself with something real, not the illusion I've been living with lately. Please." I thought about it for a minute, looking at her anxious face. Then I sighed. "Yeah, you can stay. I guess I'll have to get used to one of the most beautiful women in the world hogging my bathroom. The sacrifices one makes for friendship." She slowly started grinning. "I promise not to leave my panties hanging on the shower rod. Too often," she added with a smirk. "Honey, where do I sleep?" "Your bed," I joked. At least I hoped she was only semi-joking. I led her to the guest room. I had forgotten I'd made every piece of furniture in the room, from the dressers to the large canopy bed, all in light pecan. I had learned to carve, and the bedposts were done in intricate patterns with vines and little flowers. There was even a vanity with a heart-shaped mirror. I had made the room with a little girl in mind. She wandered around, touching everything. Finally, she turned and smiled. "What's her name? You obviously designed this room for a daughter. I assume you had a name picked out?" "Oh no. I always thought when I married we would pick the name together. something that appealed to both of us. It wouldn't be fair otherwise. Tears welled up in her eyes again. She came over, grabbed me, and gave me a very nice kiss. I have the feeling you'll be an excellent father. Good night, Jamie. I stood and watched her for a second before telling her good night. Movement woke me. I looked at the clock, 4 in the morning. I wondered what I had heard until I saw her at the foot of the bed. I freaked out for a moment before I remembered she was still in the house. Are you all right? Instead of answering, she dove onto the bed, soaking my shoulder with tears. No, I'm not all right. Can I stay here for a bit? I need to feel loving arms around me, at least for a little while. I'll go back to my room when I calm down. I pushed the covers back, and she snuggled in, her head on my shoulder. She smelled great and felt wonderful. I fell asleep with my arm wrapped around her. I woke at 8, and she was still there, still snuggled tightly. Her head was on my shoulder, and my other arm was wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. I lay there thinking how beautiful she was without makeup, her hair spread out in a messy fashion. 15 minutes later, one eye popped open. How long have you been staring at me? A little while, and I wasn't staring. More like admiring. Jen grinned and stretched, sliding her body along mine. I instantly got hard, and she felt it. She pushed me away, giggling. I'm ready for breakfast. We showered separately, although the thought of her naked body just on the other side of that door did nothing to help my situation. I had to stand under cold water just to gain control. Jen had been busy. Pots and pans were everywhere. She wouldn't let me help, so I sipped coffee and admired her as she flitted from task to task. Jen had made crepes, and they were excellent. Where did you learn to do that? Paris. I spent 3 months in an intensive cooking course. We prepared dishes for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. One of the many reasons I was incommunicado. She cooked, so I cleaned up while she sipped coffee. I hand-washed the large items and prepped the rest for the dishwasher. Are you always this neat? Yeah, Uncle Sam taught me. And since I live alone, it's pretty easy to keep the place clean if you don't let things pile up. She changed subjects quickly. Why aren't you married, Jamie? You might as well wear a t-shirt that says prime husband material. Honestly, I haven't found anyone I loved enough to consider marriage. Unlike a lot of animals, I intend to mate for life, so I have to be damn sure. I was in love with a woman once, but nothing came of it. Why not? Because she was married to someone else. If I had pursued her, talked her into cheating, it would have never worked. How could I trust someone who would do that to another who was supposed to be the love of her life? If she had, could I respect her? It's a shame because she was just about as perfect as a wife could be. Jen blushed, realizing I was talking about her. Then she grinned. What shall we do today? What do you usually do on Sundays? I usually go to church or go fishing. You go to church? That surprises you? Not really, although I've never heard you talk about religion. I usually don't, and I don't try to recruit others to my way of thinking. Is it too late to go? I checked the time. It's too late for Sunday school, but we have time to get there for the sermon. If you dress quickly enough. She giggled as she moved. I was a fashion model. There are professional quick change artists out there slower than me. 10 minutes and you better be ready. I shaved and checked my closet, choosing an old suit, not wanting to wear one of Steve's and bring up memories. True to her word, she was ready before I was. She was dressed simply, in a knee-length dress with a high neckline, but she could make anything look good. Heads turned and conversation slowed as we entered the church. I was greeted by my friends and introduced Jen. Then the sermon started. I liked the preacher we had now quite a bit. He was much calmer than the one before him. That guy was all hellfire and damnation. It wasn't long before we thought he was unstable. He found out we were talking to the governing board about maybe transferring him and had a meltdown in the pulpit. The next sermon was almost impossible to understand, ending when he pulled a pistol out and started ranting about how we'd never replace him. It was a very tense 20 minutes before the cops got there in force. An usher had slipped out and called them the minute the gun appeared. Negotiators were called, and a SWAT team showed up, followed by the news media. 2 deputies quietly crawled among the pews, getting the children out while the negotiator kept the preacher's attention. Another usher unlocked the back door, allowing the police to get close enough to taser him when he waved the gun in the air. It was a good thing because when the taser hit him, he fired twice reflexively. It turned out he was having a mental breakdown triggered by his wife's death and a dependency on prescription drugs. The church managed to get the charges reduced and get him into rehab. He later sent a long letter of apology from his new posting in Africa, a place he volunteered to go to in atonement. If you sit in the right pew, you can still see the patches over the bullet holes. The sermon that day was about marriage, commitment, and dealing with the pressures of modern life. The preacher emphasized that commitment to marriage should be second only to your commitment to God. Strong, loving relationships are the cornerstone of modern society and should be a place of strength, just like faith in God. I saw a lot of nodding and a lot of uncomfortable people. Jen seemed to hang on every word. As we filed out, the preacher gathered Jen up in a big hug. "You don't remember me, do you? I'm Mike Flanagan, Father. I don't have words to express how much your help meant to our family. I often tell people you are proof that angels walk on this earth." Jen blushed deeply but smiled. "It was just a little thing I could do to help. How is your son doing?" "He's fine, in total remission. The surgeons are satisfied they got it all. He's back with the fire department, although they won't let him do anything strenuous yet. So, this was the angel he spoke about so often," the preacher said, turning to the congregation. "He told us how his son was dying, and even as he prayed, he was losing hope. An angel appeared, telling him his son would be all right. Faster than he could understand, his son was on a medical jet to a major cancer center and in surgery in less than 10 hours. There was never any discussion of cost, and he never saw a medical bill. He called it a modern-day miracle. He thanked me for bringing her to church so he could finally express his gratitude, asking if she lived nearby." Jen stepped in before I could answer. "I'm living with Jamie right now, Reverend. Unfortunately, it isn't in sin, but I'm working on it." The preacher turned a little red but grinned. "Well, before it gets that far, think about my sermon today. I've never officiated at the wedding of an angel." Jen promised to give it serious consideration and said she'd get back to him. I grinned at her as we drove home. "What?" she asked. "I've never slept with an angel before. I thought the glow last night was from my neighbor's street lamp. I have to say it was very nice." Jen colored slightly before grinning back. "Oh, I can be a real little devil when I backslide. That only happens when I'm in love, but when it happens, it burns hotter than any nuclear bomb ever detonated. What shall we have for lunch?" We stopped at the country club. I knew the chef, and they usually put on a pretty good buffet. Once again, the place went quiet when we entered. I figured sooner or later I'd get used to it. The food was excellent, and she surprised me with how full her plate was. Michelle, the chef, came out and walked among the patrons, stopping at our table. Soon they were in a rapid-fire discussion in French. He kissed her on both cheeks, told me he thought I was the luckiest man alive, and continued circulating. "What was that all about?" I asked. "Food, honey. We were speaking food. He really is quite good." I wondered about the honey comment, but let it go. We went home. It felt odd to call it that, even in my mind. She insisted I finish my rocking chair project. "I'm not here to disrupt your life. I have a few things to do, and maybe I'll join you. Maybe I can help if you'll let me." She grabbed her laptop from her car and disappeared into the spare bedroom. I was almost finished dry-fitting everything when she came into the shop 2 hours later. She sat on a stool and watched for a few minutes before coming over to help. I was grateful for the assistance. Sometimes you need 3 hands on these projects. When everything was in place, we stood back, her admiring it while I looked for flaws. The seat was a bit uneven on one corner, so I'd have to fix that before gluing everything up. One of the back spindles looked a little off, and I might have to adjust the length so it would seat better. Other than that, it looked good. Jen helped as I gently took it apart, laying the pieces out on a long table. I took the seat over to the sander and adjusted it. Then I measured the hole, took a little off the bottom of the spindle, and it was ready to glue up. I decided to stain the parts first for an even coat and durability. I wasn't sure how dark to make it, so I asked her opinion. "What does the rest of the furniture in her house look like?" Excellent question. Sarah has mostly upholstered pieces, but the few wood pieces I remember had a medium tint. I got out 3 different stains and a scrap piece of wood, rubbing a bit of each on the board. Jen pointed to the lightest one without hesitation. "This one? It'll make the grain of the wood really stand out." She wanted to help, but I discouraged it. Most beginners put too much on at once, which makes it darker than we want. I suggested she practice on the scrap piece or watch me. Jen watched for a while, then grabbed a pair of rubber gloves and played with the scrap while I finished. There wasn't a bare spot left when she was done, and she caught on quicker than most beginners. She glowed under my praise for hours. Right before bedtime, I glued everything up and clamped the chair. In 24 hours, I would check the glue, and if it felt set, I'd take the clamps off. If not, I'd leave it for another day. We went to bed separately, and I was so tired I didn't realize she had slipped in until I woke the next morning. She felt so good. I just held her until I had to get up for work. I grinned all day. Even the most aggravating subcontractor couldn't bother me, which I think bothered him. My good mood lasted until I got home to find a really upset Jen waiting for me. "Why didn't you wake me up? I thought you might like to sleep in. You need to let me do the thinking around here." One look at my face, and she knew she had made a mistake. "I am sorry, honey, that came out all wrong. What I meant to say is that I wanted to get up with you, maybe even cook you some breakfast. Is that so bad?" "I appreciate the thought. I live by myself, remember? I'm used to taking care of myself." Her frown deepened. "I understand. It's just that I like to pull my own weight. I don't want to be a burden." I remembered the first few times I'd been around her. She could barely find her way to the kitchen and couldn't cook at all. Her maid did most of the meals for them. Something was starting to smell good. Jen changed the subject. "Look, I made dinner." And she had, and it smelled great. She beamed when I told her, "It's not quite done. Another hour should do it." I took advantage of the time to go over the rocking chair one more time, deciding it was as done as it was ever going to get. I called Sarah. "Come by tomorrow and pick up your chair." She was so happy, still gushing when I hung up. Dinner was excellent, probably the best meal I'd ever had. I noticed bouquets of flowers in random places, and she smiled. "I picked them out of your garden. I hope you don't mind." "Pick all you want. I use them to bait pollinators for the vegetables, but I plant more every year because I like them so much. It's a shame, really. Lots just go to waste. I'm sure there are people who would enjoy a bunch from time to time." The next day, she went to a craft store and bought a bunch of vases and some ribbon. She called Jan, outlined her idea, and Jan immediately endorsed it. She was in the garden when I got home Friday with 5-gallon buckets and garden shears. Every bucket was filled with flowers. She waved me over. "I hope you were sincere when you said you wished others could enjoy the beauty of your flowers. I called in a pizza because we're going to be too busy to cook. Now, if you'll finish the buckets, I'll start arranging." There were 25 vases, and she must have had some experience because she arranged the flowers beautifully. There were African daisies, different colors of zinnias and cosmos, and in the center, towering over them all, a sunflower. I tried to help but gave up quickly, limiting my contribution to filling the vases with water and packing them carefully into boxes when she was finished arranging them. 2 hours later, we were finished and had flowers sitting all over the house. The smell was almost overpowering, especially mixed with the pizza. Dinner done and showers over, we sat on the couch. She had a glass of wine and I had a ginger ale. I think I'd been pretty good at holding it in, but I had to ask, "What in the world are you going to do with all these flowers?" "I'm not going to do anything with them. We're going to the hospital tomorrow and give them out, starting in the children's ward. Please say you'll help me." Not how I envisioned spending my Sunday, but the look she gave me made me feel like I'd be kicking a puppy if I said no. "All right." She just glowed. There was no other way to describe it. She slid into my arms and snuggled for a while. I dozed off and she woke me, saying it was time for bed. I stumbled into my bedroom, not realizing she was right behind me. She slipped off her robe and twirled, making her translucent gown rise. I got a microsecond view of 2 very nice cheeks before it settled down. "Bed. We're going to need our sleep." It took me a little while to calm down enough to go to sleep. She snuggled, feeling the iron bar between us, and gave me a nice kiss. She was out in seconds. It took me an hour to get to sleep. We went to church again the next morning, and I saw Jen in a serious discussion with the preacher. I was wondering what it was about when he handed her a paper after lunch at the country club, where I had to listen to a 20-minute conversation in French. At home, Jen teared up a little when I pulled Steve's truck out of the shed. I kept it in good condition, and she was smiling by the time we got the flowers loaded. There were 25 vases, and I figured we'd just leave them at the nurse's station and go. Wrong, wrong, wrong. There were also a bunch of stuffed toys, and I wondered what that was about. 3 nurses and Jen met us at the door, rushing out to help carry the flowers and animals in, giggling and talking a mile a minute. Jen pulled out the list the preacher had given her and started prioritizing. After the first stop, I was ready to go home. The little girl was 5 years old and dying. The nurse told us she liked horses, and Jen had a unicorn among the stuffed animals, so she got that out for her. There was no one in the room when we got there. Apparently, the parents were divorced because of the pressure of the situation and wouldn't be in the same room at the same time, so she went long periods without any company at all. I was beyond furious when I heard that. If she was my child, you couldn't have blown me out of her room with 5 pounds of C4. Despite the bald head and the frail frame, the child was all smiles when she got visitors along with a unicorn and flowers. Jen told her that I grew the flowers, and she asked if she could come see them when she got out. We both promised she would be more than welcome. I got up abruptly and walked back to the station, taking a bouquet apart and weaving a garland for her head, something my mother had taught me when I wasn't much older than the child. Jen looked up sharply when I walked back in, but smiled through tears at the reaction of the child when I placed the garland on her head. We had to take pictures with her, and a nurse who came in to check her vitals said she would print a couple out for her to enjoy. I still have one of me holding her carefully while she snuggled with both of us. I take it out once in a while, remembering we were able to give her at least one good day. We planned to spend about 15 minutes with her before moving on, but we stayed an hour until her medication put her to sleep. Jen took 10 minutes redoing the makeup that had run from her tears. I just wiped my eyes and told the nurses I had allergies. We gave out 9 more bouquets to children, then switched to senior citizens. The child had ripped my heart out, but the sight of those old people, many of them alone in this world, weeping with gratitude to be seen as a person, broke it into little pieces. A 94-year-old woman cried like a baby while she snuggled the stuffed sheep she had picked, then hugged us as hard as her frail body would allow. I thought we were done until Jen brought us to the nursery. The sight of all those babies finally caused Jen to melt, coming into my arms and weeping great tears. She was no doubt thinking of Steve and their missed opportunities. When she finally recovered, Janice asked if she'd like to come and volunteer rocking babies who had no one. She said it did the children good to be held and it helped with their development. "Why don't the parents rock them?" I asked. "Some of these children are left here by their mothers, unable to care for them. Others may have single mothers with dependence issues. Some are born and have to go through drug withdrawal immediately. Those are the ones that really need to be held." Jen said she would be there Monday morning. It was a quiet ride home. Jen got into sweats, dragged a pillow and blanket to the sectional, and demanded I snuggle with her, emotionally wrung out. We both went to sleep, waking up just in time for a light supper and then back to bed. I didn't even comment when she shrugged out of her sweats and climbed into bed in just her panties. We went right back to sleep. She made sure she was up early enough to make me breakfast, cooking in just a t-shirt and panties. It was a great view and brightened my day considerably. I thought about it as I ate my bagged lunch. I knew she was sending me a message, but I was still on the fence. A love affair with her would be the stuff dreams are made of. But I had to be realistic. She was worth millions, a lot of millions. I made $62,000 in a good year and lived in a manufactured house. It was a nice house, and I'd upgraded it quite a bit, but it would never be the mansion she was used to. I was pretty sure that if we lived together as a couple, cracks would start to appear. Plus, I couldn't get over her history of just disappearing when things got tough. I would never be able to handle that. I decided the best thing we could do was to air everything out, my expectations and fears as well as hers. That plan didn't get a chance to work because when I got home, I found a very upset Jen. "Your girlfriend came by today?" I don't know who was more surprised, her or me. She apparently got in from her business trip a little early and came by to surprise you. Well, surprise. I took a deep breath. "Jen, why are you so upset? Did you think I lived like a monk, pining for something I could never have? I live in the real world, honey. I can't just disappear if things don't suit me and then pop up months later like I was never gone, let alone expect people to accept it." Shocked did not even describe the look on her face. I told you I was mourning and trying to get my life back on track. Yes, it was rude and thoughtless to disappear on you and my friends, but I have a habit of not thinking things through. If I had, I would have never married Steve or met you. That shocked me. I thought they were deeply in love. She saw the look on my face. That didn't come out right. I did love Steve a lot, but I figured out pretty quickly that Steve was a pretty selfish guy. Yes, he loved me, but he loved the thought of his beautiful ex-model wife on his arm at business functions just as much. I was his validation that he had made it in some way. I made it very clear I wanted a family, but after being put off for 2 years, I realized I was going to have to force the issue. I found out something interesting while I was going through his papers after he died. He'd had a vasectomy a year after we married. I suspect he was going to get tested, show me he was shooting blanks, and maybe I would forget the whole thing. It wouldn't have worked because I remembered how paranoid he was about precautions while we dated. After I read that, I realized that we'd have eventually drifted apart. I had to think about that for a bit. I knew Steve was selfish, but I didn't think he was that selfish. I am so sorry, Jen, for you and the fact that a man who was my friend would do something like that. She sighed. What are you going to do about your girlfriend? I'm going to call her. Then I'll probably go see her. She's been gone on a training course for 3 months. It was in England. She's a lot like you in many ways. Oh, she's pretty, but she'll never be as beautiful as you. She's a successful woman, making it in a male-dominated profession. She's the very first female the company thought enough of to send to that course. She'll probably make VP in 3 or 4 years if she stays on track. I'll bet she works for peanuts while the men make a killing. Actually, she makes more than most and almost twice as much or better a year than I do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to shower and change. I'll probably be late getting home. Do you remember how to set the security system? Her reply was to flounce out to her car and drive away. Angie had more than a few ruffled feathers. How long has she been staying with you? A couple of weeks? I figure another 2 or 3 and she'll be gone. I'm like a touchstone to her. Plus, I look a lot like her deceased husband. Is she looking for a clone? I know who she is. Anyone who's ever read a fashion magazine knows who she is. I figured she'd be wrinkled and gray by now, but she looks better than my baby sister. And she's 23. Are you sleeping with her? I think I dodged that bullet pretty well. I'm not having sex with her if that's what you're asking. Bet she's loaded. How much is she worth? I have no idea. I've never asked and she's never said. How much are you worth? That was kind of a sore subject. I had a rough idea of what she made, and her house was a McMansion. She liked showing me off at business functions, dressed in one of Steve's expensive suits, but she didn't like what I did for a living. She wasn't in banking and told me flat out I needed to quit my job and go into making custom furniture. She even had the financing lined up. I shocked her when I said no. I just wasn't comfortable with that. My parents had struggled all their lives and ended up with nothing. I didn't want that to happen to me. Our relationship was strained for a while, but got back on track just before she went on her trip. She wisely changed the subject, and we went out to dinner, then back to her house for a serious round of makeup sex. Trying to catch up from our time apart, it was so exhausting. I stayed the night. When I got home, Jen was gone. I just shrugged. I would miss her. It was 8 weeks before I saw her again. It was at a funeral for the little girl who had cancer. The cruel disease finally defeated her. Her mother said she died in her sleep. I didn't know she had passed until a little white-haired lady showed up at my door. Hi, you don't know me, but you know my granddaughter, Julie. May I have a minute of your time? I brought her in, sat her on the couch, and fetched her a glass of tea and a piece of cake. She smiled at the old-time hospitality. Your parents must have raised you right, Jamie. They tried. She had the saddest smile I'd ever seen. I think most of it stuck. I've got bad news, son. Julie passed last night in her sleep. She knew she was going to die, and she begged me to ask you something. Her last request in this world was to ask if you'd weave a band of flowers for her to wear to heaven. It hit me hard. I had developed a habit of harvesting the flowers once a week and taking them to the hospital where Jen and the nurses would arrange them. I'd always stop to see Julie, and she'd always smile at me. She had a few toys around and loved puzzles. One day I stopped to see her, but she was having a treatment. I knew she'd be worn out by the time she got back, so I didn't stay. Her unicorn was on her dresser, propped up on a bouquet of my flowers. I took about 8 pictures with my cell phone. The next day, I went to a professional photographer and told him what I wanted. He picked the best 2 photos and blended them, changing the focus slightly until the flowers seemed to glow. He printed it on special stock. I spent every minute after work the next week making a puzzle that fit into the custom frame I'd built. It had 80 pieces, and I assembled them into the frame, carefully gluing the photo to the pieces. It was a big puzzle for a 5-year-old, but the pieces were pretty big, and she seemed smart for her age. When it's set, I took a utility knife and carefully separated every piece, cutting from the back to ensure crisp lines. After that, I gave them a light coat of acrylic to bind them even harder. Then I assembled it a couple of times to make sure everything fit. I gave it to her in a big bag with no instructions. It took her 3 days to figure it out. Her mother told me she cried with joy when she saw what the puzzle was. Now she was gone. Just before she left, her grandmother handed me an envelope. She wanted you to have this. I wrote it out for her, and she copied it in her own hand, something to remember her by. I'd remained pretty stoic while she was there, but when I was alone and opened the note, I'm not ashamed to say I cried the tears of a broken heart. You could just barely make out the childish scrawl, but the words hit me hard. Mr. Jamie, thank you and Miss Jen for the flowers and the unicorn and the puzzle. You are my friends, and I love you. Julie. The next morning, I stripped about 2/3 of my flower beds, saving the very best for her garland. The rest I took to a florist friend of mine and had him arrange the flowers as her casket spray. My last chance to give her flowers. I went to visitation that night. Julie lay like a little angel in a white dress, my garland around her bald head. I thought I held it together pretty well until I noticed the purple horn just below her right hand. It was her unicorn. In her left hand, turned up so I could see, was a disc of a sunflower, the centerpiece in her puzzle. Many thought I was the father by the way I cried. Janice was there, came up and hugged me and led me gently away. There in the corner was the mother, wrapped up in the arms of someone who looked familiar. She looked up and smiled at me through her tears. It was Jen. She motioned for me to sit on the other side of the mother, and when she saw who it was, she transferred her tears to my shoulder. Jen got up quietly and walked away. I didn't see her again that night. I was a pallbearer, one of 4. It was devastatingly, heartbreakingly light, as only the casket burying the dreams of a child could be. The spray made from my flowers covered the whole casket. By now, many of her mother's friends knew the flowers were from me, and they all wanted to thank me. I think I got more hugs that day than at any time in my life. I sat with the other pallbearers during the funeral, but at the graveside service, I stood in the back. The preacher spoke of the love of God and how all things happen for a reason before he commended her soul to her Maker. I just stood numb when a hand slipped into mine and another took my arm. I automatically wrapped that arm around the person hugging me, looking down at the grief-racked face of Jen. She didn't look like a supermodel just then, but she looked more human than at any other time I'd ever seen her. I saw the expensive casket, the way the service was put together, and knew who paid for the funeral. Julie's mom was barely scraping by, and her father had disappeared. I walked back to my truck when they started lowering the casket, grabbing a big bunch of flowers. This is our last chance to give her flowers. Coming. We walked back slowly. Janice, Sandy, Melody, and 3 of her nurses joined after each was given a handful of flowers. We dropped them into the grave one by one until they were gone. Goodbye, Julie. Heaven is a better place now that you're in it. I hope you can run and play and that it's filled with fields of flowers and unicorns. I said it quietly, but most heard me, and it set off a fresh round of tears. 3 days later, I got home to find a Mercedes SUV in my drive. I wondered who among my friends could afford one of those. Then Jen got out, looking as timid as I'd ever seen her. "Can I come in?" I let her in, and she automatically went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. As it brewed, she sat with an expression I couldn't read. "I need to say some things, and I need you not to interrupt until I'm done, all right?" I just nodded. "First, let me apologize for disappearing again. I had this whole fantasy about us. I thought I'd walk back into your life and you'd welcome me with open arms, and we'd live happily ever after. Then reality hit me. I disappeared and you hadn't stopped living your life. You had responsibilities, a life, a girlfriend. Boy, that one hit me hard. Are you guys still seeing each other? No. Why? It wasn't over me, was it? I'll call her and explain if it would help. It wasn't over you. Not directly, but you did have an impact. The reason we broke up was that she decided I wasn't successful enough for her. She got a huge promotion and was making 3 times what I was. She wanted me to quit my job and go into custom furniture, and was willing to finance my startup if I gave her 60% of the business. I politely declined, and things started going downhill. I hear she's dating a VP now. I hope she's happy. I'm so sorry, I have to say, you don't seem too broken up. Oh, I was sad. We were together for 6 months, but I wasn't looking for the long-term commitment she wanted, especially since it had to be on her terms. So you're single now? Yes. Good. I hereby state my intent to be your girlfriend. You need to stop talking now and let me finish. I've thought about this a lot. We may not mesh. We may end up despising each other. I'm a little, a lot, spoiled. I've had everything I ever wanted handed to me since I was 19. When it happens to you that young, it warps your perspective of reality. It's one of the reasons I love you so much. You do it gently, but you don't put up with a lot of foolishness. If we were together, I have a feeling I'd be a lot better as a human being. She paused to gather her thoughts. I know my money doesn't exactly intimidate you, but it makes you uncomfortable. Yeah, I got lucky and made a bunch of money, then inherited a bunch more when Steve died. There's nothing I can do about it, and I don't intend to give it up. There's a lot we could do with that money. Raising children is the first thing that comes to my mind, but we could also be a boon to our community. There are people like you out there, people like Julie's mother, the preacher's son, others who could use a helping hand. We could be those hands. Curiosity got the better of me. Why do I need a helping hand? Your ex was right about one thing. You do need to go into the furniture business. You're a good construction foreman, I'm sure, but you're an artist with wood. People with money would be thrilled to own one of your pieces. Do you have any idea how much a custom bedroom suite like the one you built for your future daughter would bring? I checked around, showed pictures to some people who were qualified to give an opinion. How much would you say you have in that suite? In man-hours and materials? I did some rough calculations. The materials weren't that much. It was the man-hours. I probably spent 100 hours on it. About $3,500. She gave a soft laugh. I talked to a woman who purchased something similar, and she gave 10 grand for it. When she saw yours, she told me if you would build one for her, she'd give you $12,500. If you pushed it, she'd probably go $15,000. Still don't think you could make a living doing what you love? Wow. I did some rough calculations. If I had enough orders, I could gross around $120,000 to $150,000 a year based on a 40-hour week. Almost $80,000 would be profit. Not bad. Best of all, I'd still be working with my hands. She could see I was interested. Here's the deal. I'll give you a loan, $150,000. I'll give you a 10-year term at 4.5%, the current prime rate. This is strictly a business deal, and I'm confident you won't default. Regardless of whether we end up together, I believe in your talent. She sighed, got up and rinsed her coffee cup. I've stated my intentions. It's all up to you now. Call me if you're interested. With a quick kiss on the cheek, she was out the door. I noticed she had left a packet on the table. It was paperwork for the loan with a note to have a lawyer look it over. On top of it was her new phone number. I thought about it for 3 days and then called her. I could hear the excitement in her voice. Hi, I replied. I've been thinking about our discussion and I think we should meet. If you're not busy Saturday, could you come by the house, say around 10? I think she was a little disappointed that I wasn't asking her out on a romantic date, but she agreed instantly. I told her to wear jeans and comfortable shoes. She was there 10 minutes early and found me in the garden with buckets of fresh flowers around me. I gave her a quick kiss, which surprised her, then told her to get to work arranging the flowers. The season was almost over, but we managed to fill 20 vases. I caught her humming as she worked and grinned. I surprised her when I pulled my new Ford pickup out of the shed. I had traded Steve's truck at the used lot of the Ford dealership. If this is going to be a brand new start, I don't need his ghost hovering over us. She jumped into my arms and kissed me. I didn't see that coming. A very nice kiss, anyway. She was even more surprised when I backed the truck up to my shop. I have to load a few things, and then we'll be ready to go. I put the 3 rockers I'd finished on the back, carefully padding between them. To her credit, she didn't ask, just helped me strap them down. We rode in silence until we were almost there. Jan still talks to me. She told me about your volunteering in the nursery, rocking the babies. She also asked me to look at a couple of the rockers because they were getting a little rickety. They were worn out, and the thought of you falling to the ground with a baby in your arms didn't sit well with me. So I made these. She didn't say anything, just held my hand and started humming again. Jan, her 3 nurses, and 2 maintenance men were waiting at the door. The maintenance men and I each took a chair and went to the nursery, where we unwrapped them and set them up. The men promised me they would throw the old rockers in the dumpster. Jan and Jen made a list and delivered the flowers. We were there for hours. I had a little surprise for her. Sarah, the vertically challenged woman I'd made a rocker for, had just had her baby. Jen was enthralled when the diminutive woman showed up, obviously pregnant. The chair was for her to rock her baby in. Sarah was a living doll. A blonde with blue eyes, she looked like a pixie. Her husband was 6 feet 1 inch and looked like he was sure she was responsible for the sun rising every day. She sat down, got a dreamy look on her face as she rocked and stroked her tummy, then finally got up. She walked over to a step stool I had in the shop and stood on it. "Get your bum over here, Jamie. I want to thank you." Jen giggled as Sarah still had to pull me down slightly to give me a big kiss. "There, I needed to do that. I'll send you a picture of me and the baby on this chair when we take her home from the hospital. Look for 2 more photos over the years. We decided pretty early that we want 3. Every one of them is going to hear the story of how Uncle Jamie built this chair for us." I took Jen down to see her, and they hugged as Jen gushed over the pictures. "We're going down to the nursery now. Jamie made 3 rockers for the volunteers, and I intend to stress test every one." Sarah smiled and asked the nurse if she'd make sure Jen got to rock her daughter. The nurse smiled back and said something could be arranged. When we got to the nursery, Jen and Janice immediately sat down. Janice gave me a pointed look and told me to get my bum in the 3rd chair. 3 nurses came out immediately and put a baby in our arms. I didn't get to object. Suddenly I had a small bundle of crying humanity in my arms. Janice laughed while Jen and the nurses grinned. "Rock him, Jamie, and talk to him. The motion and the sound of your voice should calm him down." So I did. I talked about his future, how he could be anything he wanted to be, and how much his parents were going to love him. I talked about Little League, video games, even girls when it was time. He stopped crying, cooed twice, and went to sleep. I looked up to see the other 2 rockers motionless and the nurses in a cluster before us, tears leaking. Way too much estrogen. I suspect my little man was asleep and they took him from me. My arms felt suddenly very empty. Jen didn't say a word on the way home, and I liked the silence, so I didn't break it. When we got back to the house, she looked at me. "What now?" "Well, I think we've done our civic duties for the day. How about a nice dinner and a night at the barn? I wouldn't mind a little dancing." "Deal. Pick me up at 7 on the dot." With a quick kiss, she was out of the truck and gone. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking. Was there a future for us? Would she miss her old life? Would I offend her and watch her disappear again? Would the money get in the way? Was it worth trying? Of course it was. She had been my dream woman since the day I met her. I didn't get a chance to get out of the truck before she came bouncing down the steps. Wearing tight jeans, a western shirt, red boots, and a matching hat, she slid into the truck, giggling. "I can't wait. I've wanted to do this again since the last time you took me. I tried to talk Steve into going once, but he said it was beneath our dignity. Boy, did he get an earful. I asked him since when did having fun become undignified. Then I asked him how he could describe his fishing trips as dignified when he came home in dirty clothes, smelling like fish and bait. He got pissed. I almost went by myself. I tried calling you, but you were out on a date. Things were pretty tense for a while around the house. Well, I expect you to have a ball. I want you to keep me and a few more cowboys gasping for breath as we try to keep up with you. Let your hair down, shake that hot rump like you're trying to make it come off, and have a good time." She slid over and gave me a loud kiss right on the ear. It rang for 3 miles. It was deja vu all over again when we pulled into the parking lot. I'd gotten all the bells and whistles for my new four-wheel drive truck, a hunk of gleaming chrome and shiny paint. Then Jen got out, and once again, everyone forgot about the vehicle. When we met up with my friends, it was like we had just seen them last week. Barb was there with her new husband. They hugged like long-lost sisters while she showed Jen pictures of her wedding. She must have taken our advice to heart. The guy was super nice, successful, and totally in love. Barb told Jen when he went to the bathroom that she had told him all about her past when he asked her to marry him. He just stared at her long enough to make her nervous before he spoke. "You over that stuff now? It's all in the past." I told him it was. I told him how much I loved him and that I'd sign any kind of prenup he wanted. "Well then, good enough. Want to set a date now?" She was crying by now. "Best of all, my kids love him, especially the oldest boy. The fathers of my other two are still in their lives, but his just walked away. When my man isn't working, that boy is his shadow." When he got back, Jen gave him a big kiss, then patted his cheek. "That was for being the man Barb needed. I see many happy years ahead of you." He glowed. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll dance at your next wedding." Jen looked at him funny, and I had to explain. It was an old Southern saying that indicated gratitude, and she grinned. "Keep your dancing shoes shined. I'm hoping you'll be needing them soon." The group cheered, and I looked at her. Well, it seemed she had declared her intentions to the world. Regardless, we had a great time. Jen danced with most of the guys in our group, but every time the band played a slow tune, she had me on the floor, rubbing against me until I was hard as a rock. Then she'd give an extra push, giggle, and back off. When we left, her well-put-together look was history. Her shirt was sweat-soaked with the tails out, and her hair hung in limp ringlets around her face. She had given up on her makeup and washed it off. I thought she looked like one sexy mess. I grinned, thinking about how her fashion friends would react if they could see her now. She saw the grin. "What are you grinning about?" "How hot you look right now." It must have been a good answer because she snuggled as closely as she could in the truck and didn't let any space get between us until we were in her driveway. She knew I wanted to go slow, so she didn't invite me in. We did manage to steam up the cab of the truck like teenagers, making out for about 20 minutes. I got my first intentional feel of her firm breasts. Jen had the classic model's body, tall, thin, and on the smaller side. Still, it felt great. When we finally came up for air, she popped the pearl snaps of her shirt open, hopped out of the truck, and strutted into the house, turning at the last second and holding her shirt open, giving me one more look. I could hear her laughing as she closed her door. She was banging on my door at 7 the next morning. I stumbled to the door, and before I could speak, she shot past me. "Shower. Get presentable. I'll make breakfast, and then you're taking me fishing. I want to see what the attraction is." I got myself together and hooked the boat up while she finished breakfast. She asked about 1,000 questions while I tried to eat. I finally held up my hand. "Jen, honey, wait until we get on the water. That way I won't have to answer the same question twice." She stopped talking instantly. It wasn't until we were in the truck that I realized I called her honey. I got the boat into the water and tied it to the dock. Then we went to the bait shop for worms. I wanted to start her out slowly. I also picked up some soft drinks and water for the cooler. I eased out past the no-wake zone and opened her up. Steve had picked a really good boat, mostly from the suggestions I'd given him. Jen stood beside me, laughing with the wind in her face. I got to the little cove I picked, cutting the engine and using the trolling motor. I put us about 20 feet out from a dead pine that had fallen into the water. Knowing the fish would use it for shelter, I took a standard rig and walked her through everything I was doing, teaching her how to tie a hook to the line, how much weight she'd need for the size cork she would be using, and then showed her how to put the worm on the hook. If she was grossed out, she never showed it. "I'm going to cast it now. Watch me." I flipped the rod and the cork landed a couple of feet from the tree. I handed it to her, telling her to watch the cork. "If it goes under, pull back with steady pressure and reel. Keep the tension on the line to keep the fish from spitting the hook out." Then I sat back and watched. "You're not going to fish." "I'm not here to fish. I'm here to teach you how to fish. Are you watching your cork? See how it's heading for the tree?" Don't let it have enough line to make it, or it will tangle your hook. As soon as it runs out of line, it'll go under. That's exactly what happened. Jen squealed as the rod bent, reeling as I had told her. 3 minutes later, I used the net to scoop up a really nice bluegill, easily a pound. Well done, Jen. That's a good-sized fish for the species, and they're really good eating. Will you fix it for me? Sure. But here's a better idea. Why don't you catch enough for both of us? We worked the cove for the next hour, moving slowly along the bank. She caught 4 more bluegill, but only one was big enough to keep. We were getting ready to leave the cove to try another place when she wanted one more cast at the tree she'd been practicing on. We had to cut her line once when she tangled in a tree, and her first couple of casts went maybe 10 feet, but she was getting progressively better. Her cast was perfect, landing about a foot from the point of the tree. The cork went under instantly, and Jen almost screamed when the rod bent double. She fought the fish for 10 minutes while I hovered with the net. I got it just as it spit the hook out and tossed it aboard. She caught a bass, a nice one that weighed 2.5 pounds on the scales. She asked if it was edible, and when she found out it was, it went into the live well. We worked another cove, hitting a school of bluegill, and she added 3 more nice ones to the pile. By then, it was getting close to noon, so we stopped. They don't bite well when it's too hot. We'd have to come back late in the evening to catch more. Can we? Sure, but do you want to go all the way home and then come back? No, I'd like to hang out on the lake. You can teach me how to drive the boat. I made her do a few laps in a big cove to get her used to handling it, explaining the rules of the road to her. Once we were in the main channel, I let her go a little faster. An hour later, we were zipping around like she'd been driving a boat for years. She pouted when I made her slow down and go back to the marina. I explained it to her. If we don't get back pretty soon, we'll be using the trolling motor. We're almost out of gas. She pulled up to the pump like she had been doing it forever, and the attendant secured it so he could fill it up for another run. He parked it in a slip for us while we went to lunch. The marina had a pretty good grill, and we inhaled a couple of burgers, then sat and enjoyed the air conditioning for a bit. We were getting looks, but I had gotten used to that. Jen had on Daisy Dukes and a cute crop top. Her hair was back in the messy bun she seemed to favor. I think one woman recognized her but didn't say anything. I could hear the discussion in her head. That's Jen Foster. Nah, it couldn't be. What would a supermodel like her be doing in this little grill in the middle of nowhere with such an average-looking guy? She's still hot, though. That is one lucky guy. I totally agreed. I nearly had a heart attack when she stood on the dock and wiggled out of her shorts and top, showing a very nice bikini. It was tiny but not vulgar, if that makes any sense. Everyone, and I mean everyone, thought she looked good. The gas attendant bent over so far around the pump to get a better look at her that he overbalanced and ended up in the water. Jen never missed anything and had a big smirk on her face. Then she totally blew their minds by giving me a scorcher of a kiss before getting on the boat. Better let me drive, honey. You look a little out of it. We zipped up and down the lake for an hour before she handed me the wheel. Take us somewhere private, baby. I took her to a little cove I had discovered by accident. Trees hung over the entrance, so you had to crouch down. But once you cleared them, there was a beautiful little cove with a strip of white sand on one side. I bumped the nose into the sand, jumped out, and secured the boat to a big limb. It wasn't long before she had a couple of towels spread out. She lay down and undid her top, tossing it aside. Rub me down, honey. I did. It was one of the hottest experiences of my life. I did her back and legs, and she insisted I do her bottom. Her cheeks were mostly bare, and it was impossible to keep my hands from shaking. It didn't help when she thrust those buns up, filling my hands. She casually rolled over, and I was like a deer in the headlights, staring at her perfect little breasts. She giggled. Finish the job. Usually I don't have the bottoms on. We're in a secluded space, honey, and the boat is between us and the entrance. We'll hear someone coming well before they see us. I rubbed her down, working my way down her tummy, admiring her smooth skin. I skipped the good parts and rubbed her legs, starting at her toes and ending at the top of her thighs. Do the rest, please. If I get that far, I won't be able to stop. She looked up at me as she rubbed my chest. Would that be a bad thing? Making love to your girlfriend on a sandy little beach? It's just us, baby. I know part of you wants to. I gave her a passionate kiss and started sliding my board shorts down. I had just gotten them past my knees when I heard a giggle. I yanked my shorts up while Jen scrambled to get her top on. Two girls, late teens, came around the boat in a red canoe. They grinned at us. "Sorry to disturb you. This is such a pretty place. I wanted to show it to my friend. We'll leave now." They seemed as embarrassed as we were, and Jen smiled. "You're here now. Come on and enjoy the sand with us. If you're thirsty, we have sodas and water." I slipped into the water, glad it was a little cool. I climbed into the boat and came out with a Coke, a water, and a few snacks. Jen talked to them for half an hour, charming them until they pretty much told her their life stories. They were so absorbed with Jen they almost forgot I was there. Jen looked at me with an arched eyebrow, so I grabbed a rod and started working the cove, walking away from them. I managed to catch a couple of nice bass and another fat bluegill before returning. Jen was holding them as they cried on her shoulders. We left them and returned to the main channel. We fished until it was almost dark. Jen caught a lot of fish, and we had a pretty full live well when we hit the landing. I had her back the truck up to secure the boat, and she did really well for her first time. She insisted on helping me clean the fish before she left. Of course, there was a pretty lengthy makeout session before she got in her car. I thought a lot about it while I was at work. She was sitting on my steps when I got home. I needed to get her a key made. She was there for her fish dinner. I walked her through how to make tartar sauce and slaw and showed her how to make hush puppies. I rolled the bluegill in seafood seasoning after dipping them in an egg and milk bath. I let them set while I did homemade French fries, then dropped them in my fryer, waiting until they popped back to the top, golden brown. The base I pan-fried in bacon grease after rolling in seasoned cornmeal. We ate like kings, cleaned up, put the dishes in the dishwasher, and snuggled down on the couch. The heavy meal had us out in minutes. I woke up at 1, pulling Jen with me into the bedroom. She stripped down to her panties and climbed into bed, asleep in seconds. The smell of coffee woke me up. No one should be allowed to look as good as she did in the morning. I watched her bustle about. "Get your shower. Breakfast is almost ready." 20 minutes later, I was seated at the table, eating probably the best omelet I'd ever tasted. I asked what it was, and she rattled something off in French. I think the loose translation was, "delicious eggs." She was chattering happily, and I smiled as she was clearing the dishes. I asked her a question. "Jen, while us wage slaves are at work, how do rich supermodels spend their days?" She stiffened, and I felt like I'd made a mistake. "Why does being one of the idle rich offend you?" "Not at all, but I suspect you're not one of those. You have too much energy, too much life in you to just sit around. If it bothers you, you don't have to talk about it. I was just wondering what you did to keep from getting bored." Her smile came back. "I volunteer a lot. I usually spend a couple of hours at the hospital rocking babies. Everyone, and I mean everyone, wanted to know where those rockers came from. They caught one husband trying to sneak one into his wife's room and another trying to sneak it out the door. Jen jabbed at me for not signing the loan papers, though she didn't nag. She'd just bring it up now and then." "So what else do you do?" I asked. "Well, I spend a few hours a week on the phone and computer with my financial advisors. I saw a few models who didn't watch their money, and it disappeared. That's why I have 3 separate advisors." It was clear she didn't want to remind me of how rich she was. Good thinking. I trust most of my friends, but only a few with money. A sigh of relief passed her lips. "I also sit on a few boards and work with the fire department. I stay pretty busy, but lately I think I've been a little slack in my main pursuit." I walked right into it. "What's that?" Her smirk told me everything. "Taking care of you. Making you see I'm the only woman who will love you like you deserve. I think I'm making progress, but Jesus, you can be slow at times. I'm in love with you, moron. Don't make me think I might have gotten it wrong. Look at the time. Don't talk. Give me a nice kiss and go to work. Shoo, now." I was out the door with the taste of her lips on mine. Dazed and confused, I was seriously ineffective at work. The guys caught on and the teasing started. They shut up pretty quickly when Jen stopped by just before lunch. Work stopped as they watched Jen get out of her Mercedes. "You forgot your cell phone, honey. How am I supposed to know what you'd like for dinner if I can't get in touch? Oh, and I brought you lunch." She handed me a paper bag and a thermos, gave me a kiss that almost melted my boots, steel toes and all, and was gone. The guys were quiet for a while. Then they started. "Damn, Jamie, you're fighting above your weight there, brother." Another chimed in. "Man, she looks just like that supermodel. What was her name, Jane? No, Jen something, you lucky scum sucker." I grinned. "Yeah, she gets that a lot." My concrete guy chimed in. "Yeah, but she has a serious flaw. She must be dumb as a rock to be hooked up with you. The girl got vision problems? Did she ride the short bus at school?" "She's probably smarter than all of us put together. That wasn't a junker she was driving. She's hot, well off, and she likes to fish. She's my dream girl." Even as the words came out of my mouth, I knew they were true. She was beyond my dream girl. She was my ultimate fantasy. I was struck. She was my fantasy, my dream girl. But how often do fantasies manage to make the transition to reality and survive? Not many. Most fairy tales didn't start the way they read now. The evil stepmother in Cinderella, for instance. In the original version, she was forced to dance in red-hot shoes until she died. Most were tales designed to scare kids and keep them safe at home. It got a lot more complicated when I got home. I sighed when I saw the car in my driveway. Mom. We didn't exactly get along that great, mostly because she was pushing me to settle down with a nice girl and get on with producing the next generation. I wondered what she would think of Jen. As usual, I came in the back door, surprised to hear peals of laughter. I heard Jen talking. "So that's how she came to have a lobster grab onto her jock." They stopped when I entered, but were grinning like mad. "I see you've met Mom." Mom spoke up. "Yes, it's a shame I had to come to her, even though I didn't know there was a her to come to." "Were you ever going to introduce us?" That's when it got surreal. "Mom, don't be mean to him. Just because he's a little slow." Mom snorted. "Honey, if it was left to him, I'd hear about you sometime between the second and third child. I'm really glad you're in his life. You're going to have your hands full keeping him straight, but I think he's worth the effort. Besides, if it gets tough, you have reinforcements you can call in. I'm sure you haven't met his grandmother yet, have you?" Jen shot her eyes to me. She never understood why I didn't talk about my family much. Maybe now she would understand. "No, but I can't wait. Can you come for lunch Sunday? Maybe we'll get Jamie to grill. Or better yet, do a fish fry. Try not to get here before 1, though, so we'll have time to get home from church." I swear, if Mom's smile got any bigger, her jaw would split. "We'll be here. I might bring my sister and a few of his cousins. That way you can meet most of them at one time. Call and let me know how many so I can make sure we have plenty." I sat while they pretty much ignored me. When Mom got up to leave, she gave Jen a tremendous hug. I got a peck on the cheek and some whispered words. "She's perfect, son. Try not to screw this up." Jen just grinned. We had a light supper. Neither of us was very hungry. We cleaned the kitchen and snuggled on the couch. After a little snuggling, the kissing began. This went on for about 10 minutes before I gently pushed her back. Her face showed a bit of hurt, so I leaned in and kissed her again. "I want to talk, baby. You snuggling up to me doesn't help my brain function due to lack of blood." Jen looked a little apprehensive. "What do you want to talk about? Us?" Now she looked downright nervous. "What about us?" That came out wrong. I do want to talk about us, but first I want to talk business. I've decided to trust your business instincts. Honey, I signed the loan papers today and gave my boss a month's notice. In 30 days, I'll be the co-owner of J&J Custom Furniture Designs. Her face lit up. "That's great news. I was worried you wouldn't. By the way, what does the name mean?" "It's short for Jen and Jamie. This will be your business as much as mine. I'm sure you'll be the hand at the helm. You know how to network and negotiate. I know how to build furniture. Seems pretty fair to me. That is, if you'll do it." "Of course I will, honey. But it will be your business." "No, it won't. I had the agreement changed. You and I will own it, 50-50ths. I declared your knowledge an equal investment. Don't fight me on this or the deal is off. Are we good?" Instead of talking, she dove back into my arms. Between the kisses and the tears, I was fairly certain there was a yes in there somewhere. "Good. Your lawyer has the amended papers. Sign them any time it suits you. Tomorrow morning, I'll be waiting outside his office, pen in hand." "Good. Now on to personal business. You know, I was infatuated with you from the day we met. I didn't know you were famous and rich. All I knew was the most beautiful woman in the world was standing before me. As our friendship grew, I discovered you were even more beautiful on the inside. You were my dream woman, even if you never had a dime." She was on the edge of the couch, looking too scared to breathe. "You also know of my moral compass. So I just loved you from afar while Steve was alive. Steve's gone now, and now my dream woman is here, up close and single. I'm glad now, with what I'm about to say, that we haven't slept together yet. No, that's not right. We have slept together. We just haven't consummated our relationship. This way, I can look into the eyes of our daughters and sons and tell them to be really sure. Because we never had sex until we were engaged. Maybe that will be a strong moral." That was all I got out before she tackled me so hard the sofa flipped over. She rolled with it until she was on top of me, eyes moist, chest heaving, hands trembling. "Say it, say it, say it." I wanted to be on my knees, but I guess this will work. "Jennifer Marion Foster, will you marry me?" "Yes." You didn't let me finish. "Oh, you're finished all right." "I didn't really mean to propose before I had the ring. We'll go pick it out this weekend." "No, we won't. You will pick it out. I want something nice, but it has to fit into your salary range. I've had rocks before, and this time I don't want a rock. I want a symbol of love. Understand? It doesn't matter what it is. I'll wear it with pride. You hear me?" "I guess I may as well start now." "Yes, dear." She rained kisses all over my face. "Good boy. You're going to be so easy to train." I managed to get her off me and the sofa upright. "Maybe not. I need you to listen to me. There will be no discussion on this." Jen's eyes widened, but she held my hand and was still smiling. "First, I know you're rich. Money I'll never be able to make in my lifetime. The thing is, I don't care. You're going to want things when we start a family. And I have no problem with you spending money to get them. The thing is, I want our children to grow up level-headed, not spoiled princes and princesses. I want them to have a work ethic, to know the value of saving and spending wisely. I also want a prenup. Your lawyer drew it up for me. Plainly speaking, I never wanted any of your money. So if we don't end up together, you keep what was yours. I keep what was mine. And everything we accrue together gets split 50-50ths. I'm not going into this to fail, and I'm pretty sure you aren't either. So all they will ever be is words on paper we're not really sure we remember. Agreed? Maybe. Nope. Take it or leave it. I want you 100% sure. I wanted you. Not your money, not your fame, just you. She had a hard time hiding the smirk, so she looked down and said, "Yes, dear." "Good. I realize you'll want a nicer house when the children arrive, and I'm all right with that. I don't want anything like you and Steve had. I want a nice, roomy home to fill with children and love. Agreed?" "Yes, dear. I have a condition for right now. While we get our business off the ground, we stay right here. There's nothing wrong with this house, honey. Houses are just boxes designed to hold love, so I'm fine with the one we have right now." That threw me a bit. She had lived in mansions with servants but wanted to stay in an 1,800-square-foot modular home. She saw my look. The place Steve and I had, and the ones I had before we got together, weren't homes. They were monuments to success. You couldn't be spontaneous with servants around. One wrong picture, and careers could be destroyed. I want a place where I can get up in the middle of the night and raid the freezer for ice cream, stark naked, without any worries. Besides, the house I grew up in was smaller than this, and I loved it. You need to remember, honey, I wasn't born rich. I lived a pretty average life until I was 15 and got discovered. I've always hated that word. Well, all right then. I'll take a little time tomorrow and look for a symbol of our love. It may not be just a diamond. I always thought they were kind of bland. If you don't like it, I'll try again. Give this some thought. I don't want to start looking for venues tomorrow. I want a nice, long engagement to give us enough time to make sure we really mesh. I may disappoint you in bed. I might snore or have some habit that irritates you to distraction. I guess I just want to debug our relationship before we say our vows. Does that make sense?" She grinned. "It does, and I agree. I'm sure I have habits that you find distracting. We'll try to change for each other, but if we can't, we'll learn to deal with it. Now, enough talking. Let's get to the consummating part of our relationship." I'd like to say making love to a millionaire supermodel was otherworldly, that I saw and felt things I'd never experienced before. You know what? It wasn't because she was rich or incredibly beautiful. I saw and felt those things because she was the woman I loved. Her body was fantastic. I found she was a little ticklish in certain spots and extremely responsive in others. I kissed her whole body at some point during the night, and she nearly jumped off the bed when I hit the back of her knees. She was as smooth as a baby, and she told me as we came down from the first round, "You better like it like that because I had a laser treatment years ago to help my career." I rubbed the soft mound and grinned, liking the feeling. We did everything we could think of to each other and talked about a lot more. As we talked, our hands wandered, and in minutes I was as stiff as the first time. Jen climaxed twice before I couldn't hold back any longer. We collapsed and I went to sleep. She let me get 6 hours in before waking me for a morning round. When we fell back, she giggled. "Shower time, baby. We smell like old sex. I prefer the scent fresh. So let's get clean and see what we can do about it." "I can't. I have to work." "Not today. You'd be 2 hours late as it is. Don't worry. I called your boss and told him you had something important to do and wouldn't be in today. You don't have to thank me. Now let's get you all spiffy clean. You have an errand to run." We played in the shower, but she wouldn't let it get serious. After I dressed, she gave me a little kiss and pretty much shoved me out the door. I grinned as I drove away. I didn't need to shop for a ring. I had already had it custom made by a friend. It was a nice-sized diamond in the shape of a heart with 2 small emeralds, also in the shape of hearts, flanking it. The bands that held them to the mount were cleverly designed to look like skeleton keys, and the inside had an inscription, "You'll always have the key to my heart." It was corny, but she knew I meant it. When she saw the ring and read the inscription, she cried hard for 2 hours, stopping just long enough to give me kisses from time to time. We lived in a world of lust and love until Saturday. We picked the last flowers of the season, getting just enough for 10 bouquets. I wondered how Jen was going to tell Janice. It was really subtle. As soon as she saw her, she shoved the ring under her nose. Jan let out a squeal, and soon she and the 3 nurses, who always seemed to be around her, grabbed Jen in a nice group hug. When they realized they were ignoring me, they abandoned Jen and smothered me with hugs and kisses. When it came time to give the bouquets away, I gave Janice and each of her nurses one as a thank you. We distributed the rest, 3 to children and 3 to seniors, before ending the day in the rockers, holding babies. Janice brought the tears out again when she told Jen I was going to make an excellent father. The first thing Jen did when we got home was drag me to the bedroom. Luckily, it was a quick 90-minute romp for us. She shoved me toward the bathroom. "Shower, shave, and put on something nice. The girls will be here any minute." Melody brought her husband just so I'd have someone to talk to. Sandy showed up with Janice, and after quick kisses, they evicted us from the living room. I headed out to the shop, grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge, and turned on a college football game. We were about 5 beers in when they found us sitting in the rockers, singing the fight song of Ed's team. Melody led Ed to their car, glad she had only had 2 glasses of wine. Soon, everyone was gone. Jen started kissing me again before their taillights were out of sight. We didn't play around too much because she wanted to go to church in the morning. She made sure we sat with friends and waved her left hand around a lot. A ripple went through the congregation, and the preacher, always sharp, noticed. As he shook hands, he smiled. When he got to us, he wrapped Jen in a big hug. "You got him, did you?" She laughed. "He shouldn't have taught me to fish. I used the right bait, let him run with the hook before reeling him in. I think he was happy when I scooped him up in the net." After talking about how seriously offended he'd be if we didn't let him perform our wedding ceremony, he turned us loose. It took us an hour to get from the front steps to the car because people kept stopping to congratulate us. By us, I mean Jen. I was just along for the ride. A few husbands clapped me on the back and told me to get used to it. This was my life from now on. Mom, Grand Ole, my aunts, and cousins descended on us that afternoon. We didn't cook. Jen just ordered pizzas. I lasted about an hour before I slipped out to the shop and worked on a couple of rockers. Mom came in an hour later, went to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat down in a finished rocker. I was a little leery of her at first. She's rich, beautiful, could have any man she wanted, and could live anywhere in the world she chose. But I think she's the real deal. Honey, the woman loves you. I wouldn't be surprised if you start your family right away. She really wants children. More specifically, your children. I'm going to have the prettiest grandbabies in the world. And that's not an exaggeration. Well done, Jamie. Well done. She got up after finishing her beer and turned as she reached the door. Two things. You treat that woman like gold, you hear me? And I better have one of these rockers by the time the first grandchild comes. All I could do was grin. Jen decided she wanted a June wedding, 9 months away, which suited me fine. I worked my notice at the job and spent evenings setting up the shop. Jen thought we should push rocking chairs as our signature piece. We set up an assembly line, although every rocker was a bit different, and we took custom orders. Jen insisted we advertise in magazines geared toward upscale homes. Of course, Jen was the model. The ad campaign was brilliant. In the front of the magazine, she was sitting in a chair as she is now, holding a baby. Midway through, there was another ad of her in late middle age, holding another baby while a young woman looked lovingly at them. Almost at the back, there was another ad where her makeup artist had aged her to her 70s, still slender with pure white hair. She was holding another baby while a middle-aged woman and a younger one stood behind her. There was a banner over them, 4 generations, and a tagline, J&J Rockers, built for more than one lifetime. Guaranteed. I struggled over what to charge. I used the best local oak I could find, and with labor I had about $700 in each. If a customer wanted something custom, the price went up. I was thinking $2,000 and not feeling good about it when Jen called me to the computer. She had listed our prices. A standard rocker went for $5,000, more if it was customized. That's highway robbery. No one will pay that. She grinned and changed pages. 19 orders so far, and the site's only been up for a day. I wouldn't worry too much if I were you. I could make about 2 a week using an assembly line process, 3 if I worked 50 hours. I refused to hurry. People were paying for the best, and I intended to give it to them. We were getting ready to ship our 10th chair when we got a phone call from the owner. She wanted it autographed. Jen said sure, and then turned bright red when the customer wanted me to sign it. Not her. Each chair had a unique feature, a number carved into it in such a way that it wasn't noticeable. We didn't advertise that feature, and years later I was called as a witness in a lawsuit where the complainant said the chair wasn't mine as advertised. I examined the chair and agreed. There was an uproar, and the judge asked how I knew. I asked to speak to the judge in private and showed him a few photos of my work with the numbers featured. There was no number on the chair in question. The seller in turn sued the shop she got it from. Jen had moved her only relative, her Aunt Beth, into her condo. At first, we didn't get along very well, but we grew on each other. Soon, she was helping in the shop with computer work and paperwork. Jen managed our finances and made sure Aunt Beth got a good paycheck every week. Jen also got more involved in the business, but I kept her away from the power tools. She focused more on assembly and finishing work. It took some time to get used to seeing her in jeans and a t-shirt with a bandana holding her hair back, wearing a shop apron and gloves. One week, one of her wealthy friends dropped by. Jen, always the businesswoman, met him in nice clothes and gave him a tour of the shop. She showed him the custom-made 4-poster bed, matching chests and bedside tables I had built for her. Next, she showed him the second bedroom set up for a girl. After a round of coffee and pecan pound cake, he made his pitch. Jen knows I'm divorced, but she doesn't know I got custody of our daughter. Her mother had habits that made it impossible to leave our daughter with her. My daughter is 7, and her favorite thing is sitting in the custom rocker I ordered, number 29, while I read her bedtime stories. That rocker has brought us closer and given us more peace than any therapy. She's already told me she wants her own rocker for her 8th birthday, and I want to surprise her with a whole new bedroom suite. Can you do it? I'll cover any costs, and you'll have 7 months. Talk it over with Jen and get back to me. Jen and I made a quiet dinner and snuggled on the couch. What do you think? Jack says that despite being worth almost $1 billion, his most prized possession is your rocker. Will you do it? I thought for a moment. Tell Aunt Beth to inform everyone there's a 6-month backlog. It should take me 4 months of focused effort, but we can get it done. Call him back and tell him we agree. We may need to consult with him to know more about his daughter. What does she like? What doesn't she like? I don't want to make something she'll grow out of in a few years, but I want to add details that will bring her joy. Jen kissed me hard and grinned. Good. Consider it practice for our kids. We already have 1 rocker for our first girl, but you need to think about boys too. I asked, How many children do you want? She blushed and looked down. As many as I can bear safely, but considering my age, maybe 3 or 4 if we space them closely. I smiled. Good answer. We need to get on that as soon as we tie the knot. Our first should come 9 months and 1 day after the wedding. Jen surprised me by having Jack bring his daughter to the shop. I had her rocker ready to assemble and wanted to make sure she liked it. I made it almost full size so she could grow with it. She was a bright, inquisitive child who followed Beth and Jen around as they explained things. Jack reviewed my plans. Her favorite bedtime story was about a princess who befriends a dragon. I carved a princess on the back of her favorite dragon among the flowers and vines on the header panel. It took 8 tries to get it right, but her smile made it worth it. Jen helped design her bed, a 4-poster with a canopy. Her vanity featured a heart-shaped mirror framed by a dragon's body. When we delivered and set it up, Allison was at school. We finished just before she got home. Jack filmed her reaction. She stood in the middle of the room, twirling slowly, then shrieked with joy, dove on the bed, laughing and crying. The next day she found our gift, a dragon carved out of black walnut, sanded to a velvety texture and oiled to make it glow. The princess, carved out of holly, stood beside the dragon with her hand on its shoulder. The contrast between the dark dragon and the snow-white holly was striking. After finishing Allison's bedroom, we went back to our backlog of rockers, which was now almost a year behind. 6 months later, we received a copy of Architectural Digest. The cover featured Allison's bedroom, and the article was about Jack's mansion. There was even a photo of Allison holding the dragon and princess. Jack detailed how the famous former model Jen Foster and her fiancé designed and built every piece, making it unique. He mentioned how purchasing one of our rockers led him to us. Our business phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Royalty from Europe, sheikhs from the Middle East, and millionaires from America all wanted custom-designed bedrooms. Just excellent, Jamie. I'm sure this will be passed on to daughters after daughters, long after you and I are gone. I can't tell you how much I envy you, Jack said. I was surprised. Me? You're a self-made man with the personal numbers of leaders worldwide. If you sneeze, Wall Street jumps 50 points. Why would you envy me? All I've done and will ever do comes down to numbers. I'm a bit of a savant when it comes to money, but fortunes are made and lost every day. Long after anyone remembers us, your rockers will still be here. You can't rock your child in money or snuggle the love of your life with $100 bills. More love will come across the seats of your creations than money ever could. Jen was right about you. Jen's pretty much right about everything. Why is she right about me? She said you were the most genuine man she'd ever met. A man who stands by his convictions and always puts his family first. You're a unicorn, brother. You don't exist for some reason. That conversation stuck with me for the rest of my life. Jack surprised me by asking if Jen and I would take him and his daughter fishing. The next weekend, we had them on the boat. Jen had moved past the beginner stage and enjoyed teaching Allison how to fish. She beamed with pride when Allison hooked and landed her first fish. Jack was a quick learner and managed to catch a few himself. He ended up buying a medium-sized pontoon boat to fish and hold Allison and her friends. Jack spent almost every Saturday on the lake, often with one of the mothers. He seemed to favor a widow his age, who had a daughter Allison loved like a sister. She wasn't as rich as him, maybe worth 20 or 25 million tops. Jen grinned and said, "We may end up having to do another bedroom soon." When winter came, fishing season was over unless you were a diehard. As much as I loved fishing, I wasn't doing it in an insulated snowmobile suit and full-face helmet. Jen insisted we take a vacation in January, flying us to Vail for skiing. We took Mom and Aunt Beth along. They shopped while we skied. The condo was really nice. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked how much it cost per night. "Nothing. We own it, honey." Jen giggled at my surprised look. "It's an investment. A management company rents it out when we don't need it. It returns a good dividend. We donate all profits to several local volunteer fire departments and let firemen stay here for free during the off-season. All tax-deductible, of course." Jen found an upscale country western club online. One night, we all went to the club. Jen had gotten cowgirl outfits for Mom and Beth, complete with hats. It was hard to realize my mother was quite attractive. That didn't bother the guys who asked her to dance, ranging from 25 to 60 years old. She could have danced every song if she wanted. Beth wasn't as pretty, but still decent looking, so she didn't lack for company. We all went home exhausted, and Jen burst out laughing in the condo's bright lights. She was sure Beth had a bra on when we left, but now she was sporting the natural look. Beth fled to her bedroom while Mom grinned. Don't be hard on her. This is the first time she's gone out in 4 years since her husband died. So what if she got a bit naughty? Good for her. Jen couldn't help teasing. Did you get a little naughty too, Mom? Mom grinned. I didn't lose my bra, if that's what you're asking. Good night, kids. I sat with my mouth open while Jen rolled around on the floor, laughing. March arrived, and Jen had been busy with seed catalogs, planning our flower beds for the season. From the way she ordered, it looked like I would need to expand my plot significantly. Mom and Beth had bonded after the vacation and joined a book club, expanding their circle of friends and leading to occasional girls' nights out. Jen went to a few and came home giggling about their antics, but didn't make it a regular thing. One of Jen's Christmas presents to us was a really nice computer with design capabilities. It was meant to help us design furniture, and it truly was a boon. I wasn't very computer savvy, but that problem soon went away. One day there was a knock on the shop door and Jen answered, thinking it might be a customer. We kept the doors locked to minimize distractions. I saw her take a young woman into the office cubicle. They talked for 20 minutes before shaking hands. Jen brought her over and introduced her. Honey, this is Molly Graham. She's the very first employee of J.A. Custom Furniture. Molly was a junior in college, majoring in interior design and minoring in furniture. She was looking for a place to intern over the summer, and we were her first pick. She seemed surprised no one else from her school had thought of us. She was on a scholarship and needed part-time work, so we gave her 20 hours a week to see if she could fit into our system. She didn't just fit in, she improved it, throwing out ideas I never even thought of. With her help, we could get out almost 2 rockers a week. The only clash we had was when she wanted to mechanize a lot of the work. I shut it down immediately. If we mass produce, we won't stand out from any other competitors. Every customer knows their rocker is handmade, every spindle turned by hand, every seat contoured to their specifications. If they give us specs, they have options in leg and header design, making each piece truly one of a kind. She didn't approve, but understood. The custom seat was Jen's idea. She bought a bicycle once, costing $6,000, and it came without a seat. You had to order the seat to your exact dimensions for another $1,500. I was amazed at the price. Do you still have it? No. I got bored with it and gave it to some street kid who needed a bike. The point is, we could offer the same thing. So we did. We bought what amounted to sealed pouches of foam. All the customer had to do was shake it vigorously for 2 minutes to activate the gel. When it was fully inflated, they sat on it for 5 minutes, making a permanent impression. Then they sent it to us. We would scan the impression into our system, and it would activate the machine that cut the general dimensions into the thick oak seat, and I would do the finished work. It was a very popular option. Of course, that option came at an extra $500, but very few opted out. Molly had a friend who also needed an internship, and soon Zach joined us. He proved very adept at fitting the finished pieces, making the same small adjustments I would have made, and production went up again. I focused on carving while Jen handled finishing. By spring, we were ahead of orders by 3 weeks. It was a good thing because we scheduled 2 weeks for our honeymoon. I had no idea where we were going. Jen begged me to let it be a surprise. By then, we were already a married couple. We slept together, worked together, and played together. Jen still did some volunteer work and spent time with her investors, but not as much as before. Jan and the girls stayed close, and there were 2 girl weekends to different spots. I used the time to go hunting. I enjoyed the solitude and found over the years I didn't want to kill as I had in the past. So I carried a really nice camera and used it more than the rifle. I still shot, getting 2 nice deer and a good-sized bear during the season. I sent them to a professional butcher shop to be processed. Jen was a little leery and didn't enjoy deer, but she loved bear, especially bear sausage. She made me promise to take her next year. Things were going smoothly. At the beginning of April, Jen was approached by some old business associates wanting to use her to brand their new perfume. The pay was very nice and the schedule was light, filming most of the commercials at the same time and only going back for seasonal pitches. She didn't say anything at first, having her lawyers vet it to make sure it was legitimate. Then she thought about it. The money was a little over $1 million a year, and they wanted a 3-year contract with bonuses if the brand took off. Overall, it amounted to $5 million for roughly 5 commercials a year. Then she brought it to me, showing me all the paperwork. I read it and thought about it for a few days. I knew she wanted to do it and realized that somewhere inside she missed the life. "Do it if it makes you happy," I said. "I'll admit it makes me nervous. You'll be going back to the life of the rich and famous, the pampering, the flattery, the wild parties. I'm afraid you'll wake up and realize life with me was just a fantasy, just a taste of how the other half lives. But I trust your love enough to believe that it will never happen." She wrapped me up, nuzzling my neck. "This is my life. It's the life I want, the life I choose. Let me tell you why I'm doing it. Part of it is a favor for some of my mentors. Part of it is because it can be fun now, not the deadly serious game it was before. I'll go in, do about 2 weeks of shoots, and come back to my real life. Then maybe 4 days, twice a year, for the holiday and summer seasons. 3 weeks, honey, for $5 million. The best part is, all the money will go to the charity that outfits hazmat vehicles for fire departments. We could save lives, honey." She gave me a big kiss and giggled. "Besides, I want to have your mom and Aunt Beth with me. I also want you to spend a few days with me. I think it will help you understand me better and realize this could never be any kind of threat to us. It's only maybe 7 to 9 weeks over 3 years. I think we can handle it." Then she sighed. "I want to get the first one out of the way. In 10 more weeks, we quit playing house." I grinned. "We've never played house. I consider us just as married now as I will in June. It's perfect the way we've done it. We've debugged the system. Honey, it can only be smooth sailing from here." I ended up eating those words. Jen got her old agent back, saying she needed his insights. She still had her lawyers from her career, so there were no problems there. In 2 weeks, she was flying to New York. I was going to be with her for the first 3 days. Then I had to come home and run our business. I was going to fly back for the weekend, then she'd come home the following week. Mom couldn't stay the whole time but would be with her as much as possible. Aunt Beth was in for the whole time. It didn't take me long to figure out I'd never make it in the modeling business. Most of the people she worked with were decent, but some of the more powerful ones were arrogant. I heard a director dressing down one of the bit players in the first commercial for no reason at all. I listened for a while before I snapped. "Listen, buddy, I think she got it the first 5 times you said it, once she filtered out all the profanity. Why don't you quit harassing the poor girl and let us enjoy some peace and quiet?" The set went deadly quiet. It took a moment for the director to regain his powers of speech. "Who the hell are you? It doesn't matter. Off my set. Right now. You're banned from any stage I'm on." "If you knew how little that bothered me, you'd be even more pissed," I said. "I think I like it here. Mind if I pull up a chair beside you and watch a genius at work? I've never been this close to a real god before." One of the sound men lost it, running off the stage while screams of laughter floated behind him. The director glared at everyone who dared make eye contact before grabbing a chair, intending to fling it into the set. I grabbed his hand. "You need to stop and think about what you're doing. Is this considered professional behavior in your world? Look at those people. I bet half of them would smile while they dreamed about getting rid of you. Now put the chair down and sit in it, or I'll be doing the chair tossing, with you in it." "Who the hell are you and how did you get in here?" "Doesn't matter. I pay top dollar for security and I'm going to make sure you fall down a lot on the way out. Try to get back in and I'll have what's left of you arrested. Somebody call security." Everyone just looked at him and nobody moved for a while. Finally, one of his assistants scurried out of the room. I grinned. "Looks like we have a little time to kill. I'm going to enjoy screwing you up." I don't know where it would have gone if Jen hadn't walked onto the set just then. She smiled and spoke to a few people she remembered working with before as she walked towards me. Before anyone could say anything, she wrapped her arms around me, giving them an eyeful with the kiss she laid on me. She pretended to notice the director for the first time. Her voice was cool when she spoke. "Hi, Bob. I heard they hired you for this shoot. Just so you know, I had a clause put into my contract that if I felt like I couldn't work with anyone on the set, they were gone, and that includes you. I better not hear about one temper tantrum or instance of you being a jerk to anyone. Are we clear?" Before he could calm down enough to speak, She grinned. "Oh, before I forget, this is my husband, and I love him very dearly. Any slight or disrespect towards him will come back to me, and whoever it was is gone. Are we clear? Understand? Or do I need to use smaller words? Or better yet, I'll let him handle it." "He was a soldier, Bob. He spent a year getting paid to kill people. Just thought you should know." Instead of answering, Bob stormed off the stage, screaming for someone. Jen kissed me again. "I see you met Bob. He's an asshole, but he's a really good director. It's well known in the industry that we don't like each other, but we're both professionals. If he keeps his mouth shut and does his job, we'll be fine." I had a bad feeling about the whole situation. The perfume, seductive whisper smelled surprisingly good. "You better like it," Jen whispered. "I'm getting an extra 200 grand to wear it exclusively for the length of the contract. Wouldn't do to have the spokesmodel be caught wearing Chanel now, would it?" I watched as she filmed the first ad in a very flattering evening gown, walking through a room of people. Everyone just stopped and stared, especially the men. She reached the doorway, looked back, and winked at the camera. "Never underestimate the power of a seductive whisper," she smirked, crooking her finger at the most handsome man in the room. He almost ran to her, and the next shot was of him with his coat off, shirt open, hair tousled, as Jen ran her hand up his chest and whispered in his ear. He looked like he was about to faint. It took 8 takes and was filmed with 5 cameras. The editor spliced it together, and we watched it with the producer and owner of the product. They were well pleased. Bob, of course, objected, saying she should be in lingerie. The owner snorted, "Its name is Seductive Whisper, not Screaming 304. It's much more powerful this way." The producer immediately said he'd have it polished for final approval by the next day and could hit television, cable streaming, and even movie trailers by the next week. Bob stomped out, pissed. Jen just smiled. I had to get back to the business. It wasn't that I didn't trust our interns. No, that's not quite true. I didn't trust Molly. She was always pushing for more automation and shortcuts to increase volume. I finally had to explain to her that when she owned a business, she could call the shots. Jen and I had agreed to let her work through the summer if she behaved, and then we'd replace her. I was right. Molly had taken advantage and pushed out more chairs than was possible under our business model. I inspected them and found that 2 needed to be taken apart for rework, which was terribly irritating after the glue had set. I would probably end up rejecting them instead of selling them. I'd fix them up and donate them to a hospital somewhere. Molly blew up when I confronted her, saying it was time to get out of the Stone Age and join the real world. I fired her. She couldn't believe it. "You'll have a hard time replacing me. I'm damn good at what I do." That would probably explain why I'm forced to eat $10,000 worth of production. I really am sorry, Molly. You'd make a fine craftsman if you could discipline yourself. You have to want that, and you don't. You want the quick, easy way. Let's just agree to disagree and get on with our lives. She immediately filed a complaint with the State Labor Board claiming sexual harassment and creating a hostile workplace. I called the local office and told them I would show up for the appointment with video of every moment she had spent in my building, including audio, and was going to insist that every second be watched. I also told them I intended to sue Molly for false accusations, creating a hostile workplace for me and the rest of my employees, and damaging my professional reputation. Then I had my lawyer serve Molly for slander, libel, and as many other charges as my lawyer thought would stick. She called him 2 days later and offered to rescind the complaint if I would drop the charges. We let her twist in the wind for 2 weeks before agreeing if she issued a public apology. She hated it, but she did it. I had wired the shop because of attempted break-ins trying to steal finished furniture. If anyone tried to enter without the safety code, an alarm would trip in my house as well as at the local sheriff's office. They managed to catch 2, but not a third one. I figure he would be easy to identify if he went to a hospital. He'd be the guy getting rock salt out of his bum. While all this was going on, I didn't get to return to New York. Jen was due back in 2 days when Beth called. "You need to get up here. Something has happened, and Jen looks scared to death most of the time. She won't let me out of her sight. Your mom is already on the way." I dropped what I was doing and flew up. I went straight from the airport to the studios. Mom met me at the gate, and the security guard acted like he didn't want me inside. Mom got right in his face. If you value your job, you'll get out of the way. His wife is Jen Foster, the star of the ads. There are concerns about her well-being. You have a choice. Obstruct us and have the cops swarm the place or get out of the way." He moved aside. Mom turned back when we were almost out of sight and saw him dialing. "You need to put that phone away, boy. If we find anything wrong and discover you warned someone, believe me when I tell you, when Jamie is through with you, you'll wish you'd been arrested." Mom filled me in as we walked. "She's in the director's office with him and one of the associate producers. Jen has been pale and shaky for 2 days, and I'm sensing something bad happened. But she won't talk to us about it. When we showed up for the meeting, they shoved me and Beth out the door and locked it. She's been in there for 45 minutes. I had a full head of steam when I walked into the office suite. A receptionist tried to stop me and I ignored her. Then his chief assistant decided to make sure I didn't get through the door. He was still unconscious an hour later when the cops got there. I kicked the door open just in time to see Jen in a corner holding an office chair. Her blouse was ripped and she'd been crying. Jack was standing there grinning. "If you don't get out of those clothes right now, I'll make sure your husband sees the tape." He was waving a phone at her while the associate producer grabbed at the chair. Jack turned when the door exploded just in time to see my fist connect with his jaw. I broke it, and when he hit the floor, I got a couple of short ribs and nailed him in the crotch. He was on the floor gagging when I turned to the other man. "Wait just a minute. If you don't—" I took out his kneecap, then gave him a knee to the face as he fell. Just on general principles, I kicked him in the balls. Jen screamed and collapsed out cold. I was hugging her, kissing her face when the cops got there. It was a really good thing Jen was rich because they tossed me in jail. I was charged with trespassing, aggravated assault, 3 counts, felony trespass, breaking and entering for kicking the door in, and a few more things I don't really remember. My bail was set at $1 million, which Jen promptly posted. The truth came out during the trial's discovery process. Jen had been dosed with a date rape drug 2 days before the altercation at a cocktail party for the release of the commercials. They almost assaulted her, stripping her down to her panties. When Jen had a sudden flash of sobriety and nailed Bob in the balls, he let out a high-pitched scream that had people pounding on the door. They managed to get Jen in bed before opening it, saying she'd had too much to drink, and they were caring for her. Beth had also been dosed with sleeping pills and was out cold. A couple of the women there were models with minor roles in the commercial and clustered around Jen. Even though Bob threatened them, they stayed. Jen recovered but knew something had happened. She had gone to his office to confront him when I arrived on the scene. It had gotten ugly to the point where Jen was holding the chair and screaming for help. "How do we know all this?" I grabbed Bob's phone before the cops got there. He was using it to film Jen fighting back, taunting her. There was also footage of them in the bedroom, stripping off her clothes and talking about what they were going to do with her. There was also footage of 2 more women who had been drugged and assaulted. I gave it to the DA, warning him I'd made copies, and if justice wasn't served, the footage would go viral. Even if he got away with it in court, the court of public opinion would sink his career. There was a big debate over whether the footage was legally obtained, but in the end, the authorities hadn't taken the phone I had, and I'd given it to them, claiming there was evidence about Jen on it. It was said Bob fainted when the cops hauled him in for questioning. They'd already gotten to the producer, and he'd rolled instantly, trying to save himself. Bob tried to get Jen to drop the charges, offering her $1 million. She laughed. "Your lawyers will end up costing more than that. I consider it money well spent." It never went to trial. Bob saw the writing on the wall and struck a deal in exchange for a guilty plea on lesser charges. He got 5 years at a minimum security facility, eligible for parole in 13 months. He also had to register as a sex offender, a charge that effectively ended what was left of his career. The 2 women he had molested earlier were suing him in civil court, and it was a pretty good bet he'd be broke by the time he got out. I didn't plan or sanction it, but I heard he had a pretty interesting incarceration. He got beaten up a few times and found out what it was like to be the victim of an unwanted encounter. Even with a tennis court, it was still a prison. The producer wasn't so lucky, serving 7 months in a regular minimum security prison. I don't know if he had a pleasant stay, but I do know he got busted for fighting and had to serve another 4 months. The receptionist and assistant withdrew their charges when they were told the DA was considering charging them with aiding and facilitating the assault. The owner of the perfume and the executive producer were beside themselves with anger and regret for what Jen had to go through. They promised her the next shoot, unless she wanted out of the contract, would be in another location with a crew she had to approve before shooting started. She thought about it and decided to finish the contract. Her next shoot was scheduled for Miami in the summer and Aspen in the winter. I avoided jail time, but it was a close thing. When it went to court, the lawyers portrayed me as a man willing to do anything to save his wife from assault. Pretty easy to do because that's what happened. I was on probation in New York for a year, and they firmly suggested I spend my vacations elsewhere. Not a problem. They had to make an exception for the first probation visit, but managed to transfer it to my home state for the rest. Jen recovered in time for the wedding. I was all for postponing it until she was more settled, but she surprised me by how strongly she refused. Not no, but hell no, I need this, honey. I want good memories, not to wake up with nightmares like I did for a while. So it came to pass that an average man married a millionaire supermodel in a small country church on a sunny June afternoon. The service was beautiful, even though we had to hire half the cops in our county and surrounding areas to keep the hordes of reporters away. A few of the more persistent ones were arrested and held in jail until the wedding was over. The rest took the hint and pretty much behaved. 200 or more cameras clicked like mad when we exited the church. Jen's face was glowing, and she was so happy she blew kisses at the reporters. The cops got a laugh out of the fact the reporters would not have another opportunity for pictures because we got into the small helicopter that we'd flown in 2 days before and hidden, lifting off before they could react. We expected a few reporters initially because she was still rich and famous, but her attack and subsequent legal action pushed her right back into the limelight. It got so bad we had to fence our property and have security guards for a while. It became a game. The guards would tell us where they were hiding, and I'd grab the shotguns and clay targets. We'd set the throwers so the targets would be well into the air, but directly over their heads before we shot. Jen was really good at it, and she would laugh when they would break cover and run, pieces of clay raining down on them. A few tried to press charges, but the sheriff just shrugged. They have a legal right to discharge their firearms on their own property as long as it's before 11 at night and after daylight in the mornings. Not much I can do about that. You shouldn't be dumb enough to be standing on a skeet range. We vacationed in a warm climate on a small private island. On the third day, I told her it was time to get on with the baby making, and she laughed, rubbing her tummy. "This isn't fat, baby. I'm 10 weeks along." I rolled over, looking at the smooth back of the love of my life. Our 30th anniversary was in 3 weeks. We were going to spend it on the same little island as our honeymoon. Now, though, we own the island. The original owner did not manage his money well, and when he had to sell it, Jen bought it without telling me. We'd owned it for 10 years, and it was the preferred vacation spot for our family. JJ, Jen Jr., had chosen to follow in my footsteps and went into furniture design. The only thing that disappointed me about her choice was that she preferred to work in plastic and metals. She won awards, so I guess it was all right. She did insist that I make her rocker when she and her husband announced they were pregnant. Her daughter is 8, and Grandma Jen is her favorite babysitter. I think she likes me too, but it could be the little figures I carve for her. Our son Eric chose another path and became a lawyer. He married and divorced 2 years later. She went for the money, only to discover he had none except for his salary. He was a little leery of women for a while. Then one day, Jack showed up. He had stayed in touch over the years and managed to make one weekend a summer to fish with us. His new wife was a little overwhelmed at first. She caught a nice bass and it was off to the races. Allison had bonded with her really well. She was 11 when they married. Bonnie had never had children, but she quickly became as protective as a mother bear. I pitied the first boy who dared ask Allison out. She'd probably know everything about him going back 4 generations before he even rang the doorbell. We were at Allison's baby shower, and Bonnie cried hard when we gave her the rocker. Jack wanted to buy it, but we insisted it be a gift. Fast forward 26 years. Jack came by with his family for our annual fishing trip. By then, our kids were grown, but they still loved joining in. We had several boats, so we rented a couple of pontoons. The older folks ended up together while the younger ones paired off on the other boats. JJ, her husband, and their 3 kids went with Allison, her second husband, and their 3 kids, including one from his past marriage. That left Eric and Jack's youngest daughter, Melanie. You could hear them arguing over the water a few times, and we just looked at each other and sighed. Eric was divorced, and Melanie had broken up with her longtime boyfriend 2 months before their wedding. He got mad about signing a prenup and took it out by cheating on her with her best friend. She kicked him out the next day. Whatever Eric and Mel argued about, they seemed to resolve it by the time we got back to the landing. Everyone went back to the house to clean fish and prepare for the big dinner, except Eric and Mel. They wanted to go on a sunset cruise. We just smiled. One thing led to another, and they married 14 months later. They recently announced their first pregnancy. Jack later asked me to help him build a rocker. I was more than happy to help. They didn't have a prenup, insisting it wasn't necessary. Jack told me he never felt more confident in his life than when he tore up the papers he prepared. Jen made me retire at 50, though I still occasionally made a rocker or bedroom suite for old friends. Sometimes I thought about her first husband, Steve. He had everything he could ever want but was too greedy and ambitious to be happy. I regret his death and sometimes feel a bit guilty about my happiness, but I get over it quickly. Deep down, I know they would have divorced if Jen had found out about the vasectomy. Steve was always a friend to me, but his priority should have been his wife and her happiness. If he couldn't give it to her, he should have let her go. He was too proud of the perfect wife on his arm at dinners and events. He never realized his fantasy wasn't real. Jen, for all her beauty, was just a woman who needed love, respect, and attention from her partner. Seems pretty simple, doesn't it? I had a childhood friend, Lenny, whom I had lost touch with over the years. I invited him to the wedding, surprised when he showed up with a beautiful woman on his arm. After that, he visited infrequently, always stopping by on his way to somewhere. Lenny was not a handsome man, but his force of personality made him rise above the pretty people around him. Despite his average looks and quiet dress, Lenny was famous. He wrote his first novel at 29, his first bestseller at 33, and had a string of very successful novels by 57, many of which were made into films. We didn't even know he knew how to spell. I was reminded of him as I looked at Jen's flawless back. We were sitting at a table as the reception was winding down, talking. He always had an odd sense of humor and had been laughing all night. Jen finally asked him what was so funny. "You guys," he said, "not in a ha-ha way, though. You're the stuff of myths, proof that unicorns exist." Jen thought about that for a while, and it led to a few adventures in the bedroom and some pretty frank discussions, all good ones. One day, Melody and the girls came by, laughing as they piled into Jen's SUV for an afternoon out. That night, I noticed a bandage on her shoulder. She assured me it was just a minor procedure and nothing to worry about. 3 days later, she came out of the shower with some medicine in her hand. "Honey, will you rub this on my shoulder? The doctor said it would help it heal quicker." Like I was going to say no. I just froze when she turned her back. The procedure turned out to be a tattoo, something she told me she'd always wanted but didn't get while she was modeling. She said she had worked with a girl who had tattoos and how much longer they had to stay in the makeup chairs to cover them for a shoot. So she held off on getting one herself. Her tattoo was of 2 unicorns, a male and a female, their necks entwined while they nuzzled each other. The artist she chose was the best she could find. The colors were vibrant, and the details were painstakingly precise. It was beautiful, and I told her so, promising to kiss it when it healed more. A year after JJ was born, the tattoo was modified to include a little unicorn beside the couple. After Eric was born, another little unicorn was added on the other side. The artist asked for permission to show the tattoos in a magazine article about his work. It was the last time Jen modeled. She posed, looking over her shoulder with a smile, her bare back glowing while the tattoos seemed ready to trot off her shoulder. This photo became the cover of the issue. The artist suddenly found himself swamped with requests from famous people. Some wanted the same tattoo, but he refused. Part of the agreement for showing Jen's tattoo was that he would never replicate it, and he honored his word. I kissed the little unicorns and lingered over the big one. Jen cooed and turned, pulling me into her. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.